Chapter 356. The loud and impassioned voice was like a waterfall that soared into the sky. At this moment, not only were the 3,000 soldiers standing upright, even Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei Wusheng, and the other elites of the Cold Front who were watching all this from afar stood upright. They looked like they were about to be inspected by Yang Qindong. Please be at ease. Yang Qindong's heartbeat quickened, but he tried his best to maintain a calm expression. Yes, sir. Luo Pa saluted again, then turned around and ran back to the formation. He stood beside the political commissar of the 2nd Regiment, Kong Jie, and looked at Yang Qindong in front of him. Their 6th young master was also the founder of Yang Xie's new army. He was also their leader and spiritual pillar. To become a member of the Cold Front, one had to go through the recognition of loyalty. What was loyalty? It was to be loyal to the 6th young master. In this aspect, the political instructors did a good job. Their usual propaganda was also on point. They used an almost brainwashing method to make everyone understand that the reason why they could have such good equipment, such good military discipline, such a good life, and such a beautiful and limitless future was all thanks to the support and contributions of the 6th young master. The 6th young master had done so much for them, so what should they do to thank him? Shouldn't he perform well and prove his strength with his actions? Should he prove that the 6th young master didn't misjudge him? At the same time, he should use his actions to fight for more glory and protect this hard-won happiness for himself and his future descendants. It was precisely because of this kind of teaching that Yang Qindong was gradually regarded as the incarnation of God. As long as it was the Cold Front, no one would not respect him and thank him. And today, this legendary figure was standing in front of them. How could they not be excited? How could they not be excited? After the order to be at ease, the 3,000 soldiers raised their left feet in unison. Then Yang Qindong walked to the front of the 3,000 people in a few strides. Dressed in green, he looked a little frail, especially under the drizzle. He looked a little haggard. However, when the person standing there was Yang Qindong, everything changed. When he opened his mouth and said, "Comrades, thank you for your hard work," the 3,000 soldiers replied in unison, "We serve the people." Good. I have seen your performance. I am very happy and even a little excited. Yang Qindong raised his right hand, and the 3,000 young Xie soldiers quieted down again. At this moment, only Yang Qindong's voice could be heard in the drizzle. "You guys are the most outstanding Cold Front. You guys are also the strongest mercenary army in the world. You guys have the strictest training and the strongest weapons in the world. This means that you guys are now and will always be the strongest army. In the future, your children and grandchildren will be proud of you." Today, the heroic sect of the southern Ming dynasty invited us to help them quell the rebellion because they saw your abilities. Only those who have fought 100 battles can be called elite soldiers. Next, you will face real battles, and you might even face life and death. However, please believe me when I say that as long as you can perform normally and perform well with what you have learned, the winner will definitely be you. Military achievements are right in front of you, and glory is right in front of you. Comrades, work hard. I will watch your wonderful performance from the side. Do you have the confidence to defeat the enemy and show our military might? Yes, yes, yes. The excited voices continued to reverberate in the air. At this moment, the drizzle stopped as if it was affected by the warriors' passion. The moment the drizzle stopped, Yang Qindong saluted solemnly and ended his speech. In fact, Yang Qindong had a lot to say, so he had to choose some things to say. After all, Guaning was behind him, and there were a few great Ming soldiers following him. When the time was not right, he had to endure and hide some things. After he finished speaking, the soldier was also promoted at this moment. The companies of the various battalions began to lead their troops to change directions, opening up a path for the 6th Young Master's convoy to move forward. The commander of the 2nd Regiment, Luo Pe, and the political commissar, Kong Jie, as well as the commander of the 1st Regiment, Lu Zhua, and the political commissar, Song Zhe, quickly ran in front of Yang Qindong, as if they were waiting for orders. Yang Qindong, who had been prepared for this, immediately handed a battle order to the political commissar of the 2nd Regiment, Kong Jie. This is the next step of the battle. Familiarize yourselves with it first, then strictly carry it out. During this time, the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment will replace the 1st Battalion to be in charge of the young master's safety. Yes, the 4 regimental commanders saluted in unison and began to make arrangements. Then, they waited for the military meeting to begin. At this moment, the great Ming soldiers beside the cold front finally gathered. Guanyin, who was at the back of the group, also came over. Duke of Loyalty, Guangdong political commissioner, and the generals from the surrounding areas are all here. Also, we have new news. Zhaoqing Prefecture has been attacked by the bandits. Zhaoqing General Jia Ping has arrived and is waiting for Duke of Loyalty's instructions. Zhaoqing is lost. Yang Qindong stood there with a solemn face and asked, "Yes, it's lost." Guanyin lowered his head and said in pain, when he saw the strict military discipline of the mercenaries and how majestic their troops were, he was determined to go all out. However, the bad news that followed was like a bucket of cold water that instantly woke him up. Thinking of his own incompetence and the strength of the mercenaries, this stark contrast made him feel even more ashamed and unable to show his face. All right, gather them here. There are some things that need to be decided. Yang Qindong's voice was calm as usual, but for some reason, Guanyin felt a trace of killing intent from his words. However, when he thought about it, they had yet to meet an enemy. Perhaps it was just his own misconception. Guanyin moved quickly. In less than an hour, a 70 to 80 square meter military tent was erected. The generals of the nearby Great Ming Army also gathered here. Before he could inform anyone, Yang Qindong brought a group of mercenaries into the tent. Following Yang Qindong's entrance, the southern Ming generals who were originally chattering immediately shut their mouths. Then, they curiously looked at the youngest loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty, who had just walked in with a fawning expression. The Duke of Loyalty had long been famous, but everything came from hearsay. It was because of hearsay that everyone had their own understanding. Yang Qindong was only in his early 20s, but the hearsay and legend had been criticized by too many people. For example, saving Emperor Yingzong and the 9 important ministers was just a matter of luck. For example, repelling the Walla army was just a matter of Emperor Yingzong hiding his own strength and giving the credit to Yang Qindong. However, all these hearsay and legend seemed unreal after seeing Yang Qindong meet with the mercenaries. Could it be that this young Duke of Loyalty and Courage really had a great ability? The doubt, curiosity, and even speculation in their eyes became more and more intense. Under such gazes, Yang Qindong walked into the tent and sat down on the main seat. The moment he sat down, Hu Mang, who was following beside him, took out the imperial sword bestowed by Emperor Yingzong and held it in his hands. The appearance of the imperial sword caused everyone's eyes to involuntarily focus. What did this action mean? Was it showing his authority? Many people's expressions changed, but there were also some who showed disapproving expressions. Perhaps in their eyes, this action was a sign of cowardice. If you really had authority, why did you need to use the imperial sword to do things? While everyone was guessing, Yang Qindong's gaze fell on Guanyin, who was standing on the left. "General Guan, you can begin." "Yes, Lord Imperial Envoy." Guanyin nodded his head, emphasizing the word Imperial Envoy. Then he introduced Yang Qindong to the Ming dynasty officials in the tent. Guangdong political commissioner Liu Youfu, who was sitting on the right, was an old man who looked to be in his 50s. He was a secondary grade 2 official. He had been appointed for less than a year. Guangdong Police Commissioner Han Qing was a man in his 40s with a murderous aura. He was in charge of the criminal matters of Guangdong province and was also a secondary grade 2 official. Guangdong Guard Commander Ma Wei, primary grade 3. Pinghua House General He Sheng, primary grade 4. Shaozhou House General Yu Guang, primary grade 4. Following Guan Ying's introduction, everyone who was called gave Yang Qindong a friendly smile. To this, Yang Qindong also smiled in response. At the end of the introduction, when Zhaoqing House General Jia Ping was introduced, Yang Qindong suddenly interrupted. "You're the general who just lost Zhaoqing House." Jia Ping, who was called, trembled all over. This time, he purposely didn't change his armor. He wanted to show his blood-soaked side so that he could win the sympathy of others. After all, Zhaoqing Prefecture was lost in his hands. In reality, he was indeed fearful of the enemy. When Zhaoqing Prefecture was still able to hold on, he was attacked by Huang Yuliang's bandits. Worried about his own safety, he abandoned the Zhaoqing Prefecture's magistrate who still wanted to defend the city and escaped with 100 soldiers. Because of Jia Ping's sudden escape, the city fell into chaos. The morale of the soldiers was low. Even a general had no confidence, let alone a normal soldier. In order to survive, some of them opened the city gates and led the bandits into the city. In the end, most of the civilians were robbed, and the Zhaoqing House's prefect was killed in the chaos. Not long after he escaped, Jia Ping received the news. He was indeed afraid at first, but when he saw Lord Han Qing of the Detention Bureau in Gan Province City, he finally relaxed. It wasn't for any other reason. It was only because this person was his backer. So, he usually showed his filial piety to him. Moreover, he had contacted the Jia clan for this matter, and had taken out a large sum of money to give to Han Qing in order to protect his life. Chapter 357. As the person in charge of all of Guangdong's penal matters, after receiving Jia Ping's filial piety, Han Qing expressed that he would protect his life, but he would have to endure it for a while. When the time was right, he would use him again. Abandoning the city and becoming the general of a defeated army seemed to be a very shameful matter. However, he was not the only one who had lost the city. At least, it looked like he had killed enemies while bathed in blood. Based on this, Han Qing had some confidence. He had even greeted the administrative commissioner, Liu Youfu, for this matter. Once the imperial envoy arrived, he would take the opportunity to say a few good words. Presumably, the matter would pass. It was because of this that Jia Ping had the confidence to appear here. After hearing Yang Qindong's words about him, his expression changed. He immediately knelt on the ground. "Sir Imperial Envoy, please understand. I did indeed bravely kill the enemy. However, the situation was like this, so I had no choice but to retreat from the city." With Jia Ping kneeling, the Guangdong Prison Bureau's Han Qing also stepped out from the ranks. General Jia Ping's words are not wrong. This time, the bandit army is indeed superior in numbers. We had no choice but to abandon the city. Imperial Envoy, please understand. Han Qing stepped out and took the initiative to plead for leniency for Jia Ping. After the other Guangdong officials saw this scene, they all understood tacitly. They knew that he must have received a lot of money to save his life. Even if they were fellow officials, shouldn't they also stand out and contribute? If they formed good karma now, presumably there would be benefits in the future. Furthermore, with the idea of dying if the lips and teeth were cold, pleading for leniency for Jia Ping now was equivalent to leaving an extra path of retreat for themselves. Who could guarantee that they would not make a mistake? All of the officials thought this way. At this time, even the Guangdong Administrative Commissioner, the highest-ranking official here, was prepared to step out and speak. As the leader of Guangdong, protecting his subordinates at critical times was one of his responsibilities. Only then could he receive the respect of others and better pass on his ideals and orders. Thus, the atmosphere in the tent became lively. Many people were eager to give it a try. As long as one person stepped out, the others would follow suit and plead for leniency. With the law not punishing the masses, presumably this young imperial envoy could not do anything to them. Everyone was waiting for Liu Youfu to make a move, and even more people's gazes landed on the chief administrator Liu Youfu. However, it was at this moment that the young voice suddenly rang out. Oh, a loser who lost a city still had a reason? What's more, there were even people pleading for him. Very good, very good. But I wonder if there are any other lords pleading for him. Come, let this duke and this imperial envoy take a look. Let us see how united your Guangdong officials are. Liu Youfu, who was about to take a step forward with his right leg, suddenly stopped in his tracks. From these words, he felt a killing intent. From these words, he felt a resentment. From these words, he felt a chill that caused his heart to palpitate from head to toe. A new broom sweeps clean. This phrase unknowingly appeared in his mind. At this moment, his body that was about to step forward hesitated. Liu Youfu didn't make any moves, and the other officials naturally watched quietly from the side. On the other hand, after Han Qing heard Yang Qindong's words, he stood there with his neck raised. With an unconvinced expression, he asked, "But what does the imperial envoy mean by this? What does it mean?" "It is not your turn to ask me." In response to Han Qing's interruption, Yang Qindong replied without any trace of politeness. However, his words were all merciless. After these words, Han Qing's expression became very ugly. His face flushed red, as if he had been constipated for a long time. What happened next made Han Qing even angrier. He saw Yang Qindong suddenly wave his hand and say to the captain of the first guards, Qiu Vi, and the others guarding the tent door, "Come, take down this criminal Jia Ping, who is as cowardly as a mouse, fearful of the enemy like a tiger, and incompetent." Yes. Having received the order, Qiu Vi and the others immediately strode over. Among them, two of the cold front guards immediately reached out and pressed down on Jia Ping's shoulders. When the large hands landed like pincers, Jia Ping's expression became pained. He even lost the ability to speak in an instant. To the side, Han Qing was shocked that Jia Ping was suddenly restrained. He suddenly pointed at Yang Qindong behind the main table and said, "You can't do this. Jia Ping's matter has not been concluded yet. How can you punish him for nothing? We are not convinced." Not convinced. As if he had long expected Han Qing to say this, Yang Qindong abruptly stood up from his chair. Based on what Jia Ping said just now, what kind of general situation is this that they had no choice but to retreat from the city? May I ask, where did the general situation come from? What is the general situation he spoke of? Is he referring to the South Ming losing power and about to be destroyed? Yang Qindong's sudden questioning caused Han Qing's expression to change again and again. However, he was worthy of being the head of a province's police division, coming into contact with all types of criminal cases and all types of official infighting matters every day. His reaction was still extremely fast. After just an instant of change in expression, he once again calmed his mind, saying, "You are taking the meaning out of the chapter. That is not what General Jia Ping meant." Meaning? What does he mean? What do you mean? Is it because you accepted his money that you can't do things properly? Oh, right. Didn't you want evidence? Here you go. With a wave of his hand, pieces of paper with words on them flew up from the table and fluttered in the air. It was as if snow had fallen from the sky. the paper fluttered over and landed on Lu Youfu and the others' bodies and feet. Out of curiosity, they stretched out their hands to receive it. When they saw the contents recorded within, every single one of them was greatly shocked. When they looked at Han Qing and Jia Ping, there was an additional look of sympathy in their eyes. When they looked at Yang Chendong, there was even more shock and fear. What was recorded on the paper were the crimes that Han Qing and Jia Ping had committed. Among them, there was the matter of Jia Ping abandoning the city and escaping because he was afraid of death, causing chaos in Zhaoqing and being taken advantage of by the bandit army. There was also the matter of Han Qing accepting 100,000 taels of silver from the Jia family behind Jia Ping and speaking for him. In these records, there were all kinds of evidence placed on them. For example, the testimony of the soldiers who escaped from death in Zhaoqing, the testimony of the housekeeper in charge of the wealth in the Jia manor, and so on. They all had handprints placed on them. This was already a fact that was set in stone. There was no need for the imperial envoy to fake something like this because it was fake. Regardless of whether it was Han Qing or Jia Ping, they could have brought it up in front of everyone. What they would lose would only be the imperial envoy's face. It might even cause him to not be able to continue doing this job. Putting aside whether it was worth it to wrongly accuse others like this, Jia Ping, who had also seen what was recorded on the paper, was already trembling all over. There was also Han Qing. After seeing all of this, he immediately knelt on the ground with a plop. Then he cried out loudly, "Lord Imperial Envoy, it was all my fault. I am willing to plead guilty and hand over all of this dirty silver. Please have mercy on me." As he cried out loudly, Han Qing's gaze landed on Lu Youfu, who was standing to the side. "Sir Lu, please speak to save me. I was just confused for a moment." Han Qing's cries had proven everything, and it could also be said to be everything. At this moment, everyone knew that Han Qing could be considered to have met with trouble. To throw away his reputation and future for 100,000 taels of silver, no matter how it seemed, it was not worth it. Lu Youfu, who had his name called, gently closed his eyes. He really didn't want to speak for Han Qing. It was fine if he did something dirty, but if he was caught red-handed and brought up publicly, then he was an idiot. For such an idiot, if he spoke out and begged, then wouldn't he also be an idiot? However, even though the logic was like this, Lu Youfu had no choice but to reach out. It was not for any other reason than because he had a good personal relationship with Han Qing. After coming to Guangdong for a year, he had received a lot of filial piety. As a result, the two of them had a deep connection to many things. If the other party really met with trouble, if he just stood by and watched, who knew whether or not a mad dog would randomly bite people? Looking at this imperial envoy's methods, if something really happened to offend him, he would probably be finished. Lu Youfu, who didn't want to speak, had no choice but to do so. After a moment of internal struggle, he still had no choice but to step out from the ranks. He cupped his hands toward Yang Chendong and said, "Imperial Envoy, I'm afraid this time." Han Qing was also confused for a moment. "Please, on account of his hard work in governing Guangdong, punish him leniently." "Punish him leniently?" Yang Chendong's gaze stared straight at Lu Youfu. Just this stare made the body of the most powerful man in Guangdong tighten. Although in terms of age, it was possible for him to be the other party's grandfather, in terms of aura, he had to admit that Yang Chendong was more dignified and pressuring than all of the young people he had seen. That pair of eyes did not even seem like the eyes of a young person. It seemed to be a pair of aged eyes that had experienced many things. It was as if they could see through anything in the world in an instant. Being questioned, Lu Youfu, whose heart had also been shaken, unconsciously said, "Yes, please be lenient with the imperial envoy." Han Qing's family also has quite a bit of wealth. Presumably, he is willing to donate most of it to provide military supplies for the army to atone for his crime. Using money to buy a crime. This seemed to be something that could only be done in private. Now that Lu Youfu had put it on the table, it seemed very inconceivable. At least, for a scholar who had read the books of sages from a young age, it was an extremely shameful thing. However, at this moment, Lu Youfu really didn't know how to speak for Han Qing. This imperial envoy had just arrived. In terms of personal relations, there was nothing at all. He was not an official of the Southern Ming. Even if he found someone to suppress him, it would probably be very difficult. Even if it was really done, Han Qing's head would probably have already fallen to the ground. In order to save himself, he had no choice but to do this. Even when he said these words, his expression was extremely unnatural. It could be seen that he was truly embarrassed by his own words. Chapter 358. When Lu Youfu said this, Guanning, who was standing in front of him, had an extremely ugly expression. From his point of view, the officials of Guangdong province had truly thrown away the face of the Southern Ming dynasty in today's meeting. The generals had abandoned the city and fled, and the civil officials had received dirty money. If news of this were to spread, who knew how many people would secretly mock them? However, all of this seemed to be incomparable to Lu Youfu's actions. This person had actually openly bribed. Moreover, he had done it in front of so many people. Was he not afraid that Yang Qindong would get angry again and take his anger out on him? Just as Guanning was feeling angry and resentful, Yang Qindong, who had originally been standing there with an unfriendly expression, suddenly sat down. Then his expression relaxed as he asked, "Oh, willing to donate your family's wealth for military expenses? How much is that? Let me tell you, without me, the imperial envoy, I cannot agree." If the performance of Lu Youfu and the others was already shocking, then when Yang Qindong spoke, it was as if the entire audience had been struck by lightning. At this moment, everyone stood there with a stupefied expression. There were even some people who used their hands to pull at their ears, as if trying to see if there was something wrong with their hearing. One was publicly bribing, the other was publicly bribing. Moreover, all of the people present were important officials of Guangdong. There was no lack of important officials and generals. This scene that he didn't even dare to imagine actually happened. At this moment, even Lu Youfu, who had helplessly spoken the words of bribery, was similarly shocked. He stood there, not knowing what to do. Seeing that the tent had suddenly become quiet, Yang Qindong seemed to be very displeased with everyone's performance. What? Could it be that this imperial envoy did not speak clearly enough? Or is it that the guilty official Han Qing is unwilling to pay? "I am willing. I am willing." After finally understanding that all of this was true, Han Qing was like a drowning person who had suddenly grabbed onto a piece of dead wood. He repeatedly said, "The guilty official is willing to pay. Pay. How much?" Yang Qindong leaned on the document in front of him and stared into Han Qing's eyes. "Pay." Han Qing thought about how Yang Qindong had said he could not take too little. Thinking that this kind of opportunity might not appear a second time, he gritted his teeth and said, "I am willing to take out 200,000 liang of silver to atone for my crimes. Please give me another chance." 200,000. Hearing such an answer, Yang Qindong repeated it softly. Then he stopped talking and looked like he was thinking. This scene really scared Han Qing. He thought that the amount of silver he offered was too little. At that moment, he hardened his heart and said, "I am willing to offer 400,000 silver taels. This is all I have. I don't have any more." "Oh, for 100,000 taels. After all, you're a second-rank official of the imperial court. You're worth this price. Since it's like this, let's forget about it. I will not pursue your crimes. As for how the emperor will deal with you, it has nothing to do with me." Yang Chendong waved his hand. This also made Han Qing, kneeling there, let out a breath. He knew that he was fine for now. As for the emperor, based on his relationship with a few important officials in Jingdo, there was still room for negotiation. He was just afraid that he would need to borrow money to get through the disaster. Han Qing had no crimes. The kneeling Zhaoqing General Jia Ping seemed to have seen the hope of rebirth. Ignoring the pain in his body when he was pressed down, he shouted loudly, "Imperial envoy, the guilty general is also willing to use silver to atone for his crimes." "You're also willing to use silver?" Yang Chendong seemed to ask with interest. "Yes, the guilty general is willing to use silver. He is also willing to take out 400,000 taels of silver for the expenses of the mercenary army," Jia Ping said loudly, as if he was afraid that Yang Chendong could not hear him clearly. "Oh, you're only a fourth-level general, yet you're willing to take out 400,000 taels of silver. It is indeed a lot." After Yang Chendong's words fell, everyone else had an expression of understanding. It seemed that Jia Ping was also going to be offended. Before everyone's expressions completely relaxed, Yang Chendong, who had been speaking peacefully, suddenly changed his expression. Following this, he shouted in a roaring voice, "Because of you, tens of thousands of people in Zhaoqing Manor have suffered. Who knows how many southern Ming soldiers have died because of this? You still have the face to talk to me about silver? Where is the imperial sword?" Here, Tiger's Mane, who was standing to the side, handed over the long sword that Kuang Yi had left behind. It represented that it could behead incapable rulers and slanderers. Following this, Yang Chendong reached out with his right hand and grasped the hilt of the sword. Following this, the sword flashed, and the long sword was unsheathed. Then a stream of blood flew out and coincidentally sprayed onto the face of Han Qing, who was still kneeling on the ground. The sword fell. The head of Jia Ping, who had been alive and kicking, fell to the ground, separating him from everyone else. Just like this, Jia Ping was killed. This unexpected scene caused everyone to not know what to say for a moment. They had clearly just been discussing the price. Why did he suddenly kill someone? This imperial envoy was not old, but when he did things, it was always unexpected. It was impossible for people to guess his intentions. This kind of imperial envoy was not easy to come into contact with. Many of the officials who saw this scene felt their hearts beat like drums. They thought that, in the future, when they did things, they had to be careful to not be caught by the imperial envoy. Otherwise, even if they didn't die, they would have to shed a layer of skin like Han Qing. As for Han Qing, when the blood sprayed onto his face, his expression first froze. Following this, he defecated and urinated. Immediately, an unpleasant smell spread out in the tent. It had to be said that as the person in charge of criminal justice and public affairs, he had seen the world. The number of people who had died under his orders was not small, so it shouldn't be like this. However, if there was something to be blamed, it was Yang Chendong's actions that were too fast. Furthermore, Han Qing himself had committed a crime. He thought that if he hadn't paid the silver earlier, his head would probably have fallen to the ground. How could he not be afraid? How could he not make a fool of himself? Yang Chendong was also very displeased by this unpleasant smell. "Forget it. We'll just go out and have a meeting." "Oh, right? Jia Ping committed a serious crime and cannot be forgiven. That is why I killed him. However, some of his words cannot be disbelieved. For example, before he died, he said that the Jia family was willing to pay 400,000 liang of silver. Presumably, everyone heard it and can be used as a witness. Later, I'll have to trouble official Lu to retrieve the silver for military expenses. Of course, if the Jia family doesn't have to pay the silver, then there is no need to keep it. Bribing a high-ranking official is a serious crime and can be punished by death. Originally, everyone was covering their noses from the foul smell coming from Han Qing's body as they walked out. However, when they suddenly heard the last part of Yang Qindong's words, their expressions changed greatly. This imperial envoy was truly a ruthless person. He killed someone and still wanted silver. This was a living king of hell. In the future, no matter who they offended, they should not offend this person. Everyone was greatly shocked. They were frightened by the methods Yang Qindong had displayed. Lu Youfu was the same, but when he heard his name being called, he reacted. He immediately replied obediently, "Yes, please be at ease, Imperial Envoy. The Jia family will definitely take out the 400,000 taels of silver. However, can Jia Ping's body be sent back to the Jia family?" "Of course you can. If you want the body, just take out another 100,000 liang of silver." Yang Qindong appeared to understand. First, he nodded his head. However, the next sentence choked Lu Youfu until he didn't know what to say. It was only the body of a dead person, yet it actually cost 100,000 liang of silver. Moreover, these words were spoken by Yang Qindong. The Jia family had no choice but to take it. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel sorrow for the Jia family. Of course, he was even more glad that he hadn't acted too excessively just now. Otherwise, even if he didn't die, he would have been skinned alive. Lu Youfu didn't believe that Yang Qindong would let him go just because he had something on Han Qing. He even thought that the other party must have some evidence of his crimes in his hands. However, because his performance was acceptable, he didn't take it out. Thinking this way, he felt that the matter of the Jia family had to be handled seriously. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would be implicated. After Yang Qindong finished speaking, he took the lead and walked out of the large tent. Soon after, everyone followed him out. Once they were out of the tent, the air became a lot fresher. Yang Qindong took a deep breath and said, "Is Pingle General He Sheng here?" "This general is here." When his name was called, He Sheng was first stunned. Then he responded and walked toward Yang Qindong. Seeing that He Sheng was called, the other officials had a puzzled expression on their faces. It must be said that He Sheng was a special case among all the Guangdong generals. This person wasn't corrupt and didn't fit in with the crowd. What he liked to do the most was to train soldiers. In everyone's eyes, He Sheng was an unusual existence. They really couldn't think of anything. Could it be that this kind of person had fallen into the hands of the imperial envoy? If that was the case, then would there be anyone here who was innocent? While everyone was puzzled, they saw He Sheng walking to Yang Qindong's side in the distance. Then the two of them exchanged a few words. After that, this Peace Joy Mansion's general left in high spirits. Nothing happened. Everyone looked at each other. Only then did they realize that this was the imperial envoy arranging military affairs. After understanding this point, everyone was even more puzzled. What did this mean? Why did he arrange the military affairs behind their backs? Could it be that he didn't believe in their loyalty to the Southern Ming Empire? Of course, these thoughts were only in their hearts. If there was anyone who dared to stand out and criticize Yang Qindong, they would have already lost their courage. On the other side, after He Sheng was called away, Shao Province's General Yu Guang was also called over. Then he nodded and quickly left the place. After taking their seats, Yang Qindong turned around and looked at everyone with a smile. "I'm sure everyone must be hungry after being busy. Lord Lu, have you prepared something to eat?" "It's ready, it's ready. Everything has been arranged in Ganzhou City. Imperial Envoy, please go ahead." Seeing that the official business was finally over, Lu Youfu couldn't help but feel relieved. He responded with a smile. Chapter 359. Good. Since that is the case, let's enter the city. Yang Chendong waved his hand. Immediately, everyone entered Ganzhou City in a grandiose manner. The news of Yang Chendong killing Jia Ping and severely punishing Han Qin quickly spread throughout the city and the army. When some of the commoners and soldiers heard this news, they were all overjoyed. Not to mention the skill of this young imperial envoy in battle, at least his ability to govern was not bad. The commoners were like this. As long as someone punished a corrupt official, they would be happy. As for whether or not they would be able to gain anything because of this, that was not something they cared about. Liu Youfu gave Yang Chendong a very good residence in Ganzhou City to live in. Naturally, Yang Chendong would not refuse such good intentions. At the same time he gladly accepted. He had his wife, Hu Yan, and the others move in as well. Not only that, but he also had the back garden tidy up. Then he had the third wife, Lady Xue, invite the number 1 courtesan by the Qinhuai River, Su Moner, to liven things up. Finally, she could see Yang Chendong's face. Although she was invited over as an entertainer, the servant girl, Xiao Yun, also had many objections. However, as the main character, Su Moner was not angry at all. In her opinion, being able to come into contact with Yang Chendong was the first step to success. As for how it was done, that was not the most important thing. Moreover, the moment she entered the city, she had heard about Yang Chendong's actions in the large tent. She was very curious. Was this imperial envoy, who had openly bribed someone, not afraid that the matter would reach the emperor and he would be punished? Where did he have the confidence to do such a thing? With all kinds of questions in her mind, Su Moner appeared in the back garden in a long white dress. As soon as Su Moner appeared, she gave people a very stunning feeling. Dressed in white, she appeared incomparably holy. If one did not know that this person had once been a courtesan by the Qinhuai River, one would not have thought that this person came from such a place. On the contrary, judging from her attire and behavior, it would be more accurate to call her a lady from a respectable family. Yang Chendong's eyes narrowed when he saw Su Moner's outfit. Then he slowly leaned against the rattan chair and closed his eyes while Hu Yan and Madame Xue hugged him. Occasionally, he would open his mouth and enjoy the peeled fruits that Hu Yan and Madame Xue put in his mouth. Strictly speaking, Yang Chendong's actions were somewhat disrespectful. However, as if she was used to such things, or perhaps she was already mentally prepared, Su Moner was not angry. Instead, she gently tested the pipa in her hand and began to play. She was singing the song, Wishing We Last Forever, by Yang Chendong. It had to be said that the sound coming from Su Moner's mouth was indeed different. Even Madame Xue, who was good at this, kept nodding after hearing it. It was obvious that she approved of Su Moner's playing skills. Yang Chendong sat on the rattan chair, with his head slightly tilted back. The corners of his mouth curled into a gentle smile. His right hand tapped gently on the armrest of the rattan chair, as if he was immersed in it. He was in a good mood. Yang Chendong was in a good mood. Hu Yan and Madame Xue, who were sitting beside him, also looked happy. Even Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were standing not far behind, looked happy. In these people's hearts, Yang Chendong's happiness was their happiness, and Yang Chendong's happiness was their happiness. This was a powerful personality charm that could affect the mood of others at any time and place. This warm and wonderful scene lasted for more than an hour, and then everything was ruined by the sounds of fighting and shouting outside. Out of instinct, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei came to Yang Chendong's side to protect him. In addition, Tai Qingyi, who was standing not far away, also stood in front of Hu Yan and Madame Xue. There were 6 other women standing with her. From the determination in their eyes, it could be seen that they were not afraid of death. This sudden change made Sumaner, who was singing, shut her mouth naturally. When she saw that Hu Yen and Madame Shui were protected by people, and only her maid Xiao Yun came to her side, she did not know why, but there was a faint jealousy in her heart. At this moment, the sounds of fighting outside had stopped. Then came the shout of General Guaning. "I want to see the Duke of Loyalty. Let me go." Obviously, the person who came should be Guaning. He probably took things too hard because of what happened in the big tent in the morning and wanted to see Yang Qindong. However, Yang Qindong, who was in a relaxed state, could not be disturbed by just anyone. He was blocked outside the door, as usual. In a moment of anger, he wanted to break in. Let him in. Yang Qindong, who was sitting on the rattan chair, looked calm. It was not clear whether he was really angry, but there was a sense of coldness in his voice. As the voice rang out, there were footsteps in the outer courtyard. Then Guaning, whose face was slightly red and swollen, walked in under the escort of 4 Lung Feng. To be able to have 4 Lung Feng following him, it was clear that Guan Ying's skills were not bad. Looking at the Lung Feng who followed him, it seemed that their clothes were also disheveled. It was clear that the fight just now had been very fierce. Yang Qindong's gaze swept over the 5 people. Then his voice was still indifferent as he asked, "You want to see me?" "That's right, I want to see you. I want to ask you why you did what you did during the day. Also, what were those generals sent out to do? You have to give me an explanation." Guaning glared and shouted as if he was very angry. Guan Ying's shout entered his ears clearly. Sitting there, Yang Qindong first frowned slightly. His gaze swept over Guan Ying's body again and again. Then his smile seemed to be forcefully wiped away by an invisible hand. His expression suddenly became much more serious. "Who do you think you are? Do you think I am someone you can see whenever you want to? What I want to do, is it something you can question? You still have an explanation? Let me tell you, even the emperor of the Southern Ming Empire would not order me like this. Since you want an explanation, then I'll give you one. Beta Persei beat him." Yang Qindong's sudden anger scared Guaning. All this time, although Yang Qindong's actions were unpredictable, his attitude towards him could be considered friendly. At least, he didn't get angry at him, to the point that he forgot his identity. Now that he was suddenly reprimanded by Yang Qindong, he realized that he was just a small character. The reason why he didn't do anything to him was because he didn't put him in his eyes and didn't treat him as a dish. Now that he suddenly appeared and disturbed the other party's happy mood, was he going to punish him? As he thought this, he raised his head again and saw the tall Beta Persei walking towards him. Suddenly, anger flashed in his eyes. Guaning had been in the army, and his performance was excellent. His skills were also better than ordinary people. This time, when he followed Kuangya Minister to inspect the various guards, he was more often than not a guard. From this, it could be seen that his skills were quite good. This was also the reason why he dared to charge in alone. But just now, the 4 people he didn't put in his eyes taught him how to be a person. If it was a one-on-one, he was confident that none of the 4 would be a match for him. But in a group fight, the 4 people cooperated very well, and he quickly fell into a disadvantage, to the point that he was pressed to the ground. This was already quite embarrassing. Now, Yang Qindong only sent 1 person. Although he was tall, this didn't mean anything. Sometimes a tall and strong person didn't necessarily win in a fight. Strength didn't mean everything. Flexibility and timely exertion of strength were more important. Good. If it's a one-on-one, if I win, can I sit down and have a good talk with the Duke? Seeing that Beta Persei was already in front of him, Guaning knew that he had to fight. So he asked Yang Qindong loudly, "Ha ha ha." Guan Ying's shout attracted a burst of laughter from the surrounding people. This laughter was like a slap to Guan Ying's face, making him feel humiliated. "You're going too far." Guan didn't get a reply from Yang Qindong and was instead ridiculed by the crowd. In his anger, he immediately stomped on the ground and flew up. Then, with a step in the air, he kicked at Beta Persei's head. This kick was fast and accurate. If Beta Persei was really stepped on, he would probably fall to the ground. Without resting for a month, he would never be able to recover. Seeing this kick land, Su Monair, who was watching this scene, couldn't help but cover her mouth with her white fingers. From the looks of it, she was quite frightened. The servant girl, Xiao Yun, was much worse than Su Monair. She had already opened her mouth and started screaming. Amidst such screams, Beta Persei's two arms, which were as strong as a woman's calves, suddenly stretched out and grabbed at Guan Ying's legs. Everyone said that an arm couldn't win against a leg. From this, it could be seen that in terms of strength, arms and legs were not equal. However, this saying didn't seem to be practical when applied to Beta Persei. When the pair of arms stretched out to grab, the pair of legs, which should have been invincible, seemed to have been stopped in time. They were grabbed by something and fell into Beta Persei's hands. Then they were restrained and couldn't move. When the pair of arms reached out, they accurately grabbed a pair of ankles. The pair of legs, which were wearing high-waisted cloth shoes, fell into Beta Persei's hands like a toy. When his attack succeeded, he laughed mischievously. Then he forcefully twisted his waist and drew a circle with his feet as the center. Then the pair of large hands in front of his arms suddenly loosened. Like flying a kite, he threw the owner of the pair of feet, Guan Ying, away. Guan Ying's kick was originally thought to be able to hurt Beta Persei. He was still thinking that the martial arts of the people around the Duke of Loyalty were only SOSO when he was shocked to find that he couldn't move. Then the whistling sound of the wind rang in his ears, and he was thrown away. Chapter 360. Out of instinct, Guan Ying tried his best to find a direction and a safe way to land. Therefore, when his body landed, he rolled on the ground awkwardly. Then he got up from the ground with dust all over his body and squatted on the ground. Everything just happened too quickly. Even with Guan Ying's ability, he did not have the time to fully accept and digest it. However, just when he was still feeling a little dizzy, a large foot kicked him in the same way as he did to himself. Guan Ying only saw a black shadow in front of him, and a pair of big feet came towards him. Out of instinct, he raised his arms to block. Bang! A powerful force suddenly hit him. With just one blow, Guan Ying felt as if his arms had fallen apart. His whole body was also pushed back by the huge force. During this process, even though his feet forcefully rubbed against the ground in an attempt to stop, the force was too great. Even the soles of his high-waisted cloth shoes were worn out, revealing the soles of his feet. His body still flew back 4 to 5 meters before coming to a stop. Just as his body stopped, the black shadow rushed over again. This was Beta Persei's hot pursuit. As Yang Qindong once said, "Take advantage of the enemy's weakness, take the enemy's life. Kindness to the enemy is cruelty to oneself." He had gained the upper hand with one move and followed up with another attack. A pair of strong, thick arms had already reached over, and his fists turned into palms. He grabbed Guan Ying's body, which was still in shock and dizzy. After 2 consecutive blows, Guan Ying had lost his previous accurate judgment. So Beta Persei easily grabbed his arms and lifted him up. When his body suddenly leaned back, Guan Ying's body was thrown into a backflip by the inertia. This backward somersault was completely unexpected, and it was not what Guan Ying wanted either. This blow caused his body to come into close contact with the ground. The moment he was bombarded to the ground, he only felt that his eyes were dazed, and his whole body was in discomfort as if it had fallen apart. Thanks to his usual training, His physical fitness was not bad. However, if it was anyone else, just this strike alone would have been enough to take their life. Even so, Guaning was completely stunned by the fall. He had no idea that his opponent, Beta Persei, had already gotten up and lifted a large foot to stomp on his waist. A person's waist was flexible, but at the same time, it was also very fragile. Once the 200 kilograms Beta Persei stepped on it, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even if they didn't lose their lives, they wouldn't be able to stand up for the rest of their lives. Fortunately, at this moment, Yang Qindong's voice suddenly rang out. "All right, stop." As soon as this voice rang out, Yang Heir, who had a ferocious expression on his face and was about to land his foot on the ground, suddenly froze. He stood there motionless, as if he was one of the 7 fairies who had been immobilized by Sun Wukong. After maintaining this posture for about a breath of time, the big foot moved to the side and came into close contact with the ground again. A short battle ended just like that. From the beginning to the end, Guaning was the first to take the initiative to attack. The rest of the time, he was on the defensive, and even took a beating. From this, it could be seen that the difference in strength between the two was huge. No one went to help Guaning up. They just let him lie on the ground and gasp for breath, his chest rising and falling one after another. This was the consequence of offending the 6th young master. If it wasn't for Yang Qindong's order, he would have lost his life by now. As time passed, no one spoke in the entire back garden, as if they were waiting for something. After about 10 breaths of time, Guaning finally moved. He struggled to sit up, and then slowly stood up with his arms supporting his body. However, at this moment, no matter how one looked at it, his body was somewhat bent, and it seemed that he had suffered some minor injuries. Standing up, Guaning turned to look at Yang Qindong. There was incomparable anger in his eyes, but also pity and sorrow. He couldn't beat him in a fight, and he couldn't talk through it. Regardless of whether it was wealth, power, status, or skill, the two sides were not on the same level. This made him feel a sense of inferiority. He finally realized that the mission Kuangya minister had given him was not going to be so easy to complete. "You're not dead yet, right? If you're not dead, then stand there and listen to me. Didn't you want me to give you an explanation? Then I'll tell you right now. I am the imperial envoy, and it was your minister Kuangya who begged me to come. Since I am the general at the front, I naturally know what to do. I don't need anyone to teach me. You understand?" Looking straight at Guaning, Yang Qindong's voice rang out in the courtyard. Yang Qindong was emphasizing his identity. Hearing this, Guaning instinctively nodded. Naturally, he knew these things. He also knew that as the imperial envoy and the general at the front personally appointed by the emperor, he did indeed have the power to do anything. He was angry that the other party didn't tell him what he was going to do and didn't discuss the matter of sending out the army. This made him feel a sense of inferiority. Guaning nodded. Yang Qindong continued, "It's good that you know these things." As for killing Jia Ping, as Zhaoqing general, he led the escape and caused the morale of the army to be in chaos. Tens of thousands of civilians were trapped in the city and killed by the bandits. Shouldn't he be killed for his actions? Han Qin, as an important official of the country, actually accepted bribes. It shouldn't be a problem to heavily punish him. The emperor has said that we can take the money for the mercenaries ourselves. This is just one way of taking it, wanting the horse to run, but not giving the horse grass. This is not something I can do. As for the matter of moving the army, this is a secret. If I publicly announce the plan, can you guarantee that the military plan will not be leaked? Will it not be known by the bandits? You should wake up. I have my own plans for what to do. As for whether you can understand or not, this is not my problem. It is your problem. If it must be said, it is you who is cooperating with me, and not me who is cooperating with you. When you encounter a problem, it is best if you can think it through. If you can't, then think hard. If you can't think it through, you can go back to Nanjing and be an official of the Ministry of War. That will save you the trouble of worrying here. Yang Qindong's voice carried some severity. Those familiar with Yang Qindong knew that if he could be strict with you, it meant that he still thought highly of you. On the other hand, if he didn't even want you to do it, then he was truly giving up on you. That was the most fatal thing. After saying this to Han Qing, Yang Qindong waved his hand. He didn't care whether the other party understood or not. He said loudly, "Okay, today is the first time you barged in like this, and it will also be the last time. But if something like this happens again, I will take your life. You can leave now. I still want to listen to music. Don't disturb my mood." After saying this, Yang Qindong leaned his body against the rattan chair and then slowly closed his eyes. Madame Shui, who was sitting beside Yang Qindong, saw her husband's behavior and couldn't help but smile. She then looked at Su Monair, who was still in shock, and said, "Miss Su, please continue." "Oh." Su Monair replied mechanically. Then she readjusted her state of mind. After that, a pleasant voice came out from her mouth and entered Yang Qindong's ears, causing his expression to become one of enjoyment and joy once again. Amidst such a beautiful voice, Guaning dragged his injured body out of the back garden. Yang Qindong had finally given him an explanation. From the other party's words, he didn't seem to have gone overboard. As an imperial envoy, he had appeared in the unfamiliar environment of Guangdong. If he couldn't break through with his first 3 strikes, how could he make others listen to him? Looking at it now, he had done it. Now, speaking of the imperial envoy, from Liu Youfu to the insignificant officials who had seen this scene, all of them felt their hearts tremble. This made everyone pay extra attention to his orders. Wasn't this what Guaning himself had hoped to see before? He thought that perhaps this was the method of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Now that the move had been used, it was up to whether or not he could really quell the rebels. In the rebel camp, in the government office of the former Zhaoqing Manor, Huang Yuliang was gathering his generals for a so-called military meeting. Ever since Yingzong was defeated at Tumu Fortress 2 years ago and lost 500,000 elite soldiers, the powerful Great Ming dynasty began to decline. Zhu Qizhen, who had retreated to Nanjing, established the capital here and established the Southern Ming dynasty. In order to fill the national treasury, the Southern Ming dynasty added a lot of excessive taxes. When it fell on the commoners, it was unspeakably bitter, and the people had no way to make a living. It was under such circumstances that Huang Xiaoyang brought a group of brothers to start a peasant uprising in Guangdong. At the beginning of the uprising, they received the support of many poor commoners. The group expanded and took over a few counties, reaching a certain scale. At the same time, they were suppressed by the Southern Ming dynasty. When faced with the Ming army coming from all directions, the unorganized peasant group was quickly calmed down. In the end, Huang Xiaoyang and his eldest son were both killed. Only his second son, Huang Yuliang, was left to escape and continue to fight against the Ming army on a small scale in Guangdong. There was constant encirclement and suppression. In such an environment, the space left for Huang Yuliang to survive became smaller and smaller. Just as he was about to be trapped, surrounded, and even destroyed, the Ming army that had surrounded him suddenly retreated by more than half. This sudden change made Huang Yuliang feel a sense of confusion. However, he immediately received news that the king of Minzhuang, Zhu Huixin, was rebelling in Yunnan. Not long after, he received a personal letter from the king of Minzhuang. The general idea was that he was willing to ally with him. They would help each other and work together. Chapter 361. Zhu Huihua's appearance messed up the situation, and gave Huang Yuliang a chance to catch his breath. Using this chance, he finally stabilized his footing. The initial defense turned into a timely counterattack, and now the siege of the city. His army had expanded to 150,000 people, and the number of citizens under his rule had reached close to 1 million. In Zhaoqing Manor, after a round of fighting, smashing, looting, and burning, the place was in a mess. Even sitting in the manor, one could still smell the smell of burning houses in the air. Huang Yuliang sat on the main seat and casually glanced at his subordinates. He lightly knocked on the desk in front of him, and the noisy hall instantly quieted down. "Everyone, we have conquered Zhaoqing. Our forces have expanded by another step. This is something worth celebrating. It is enough to prove that the Southern Ming Empire is rotten, and they are no match for us." Ha ha ha. These encouraging words made everyone in the hall burst into laughter. Almost all of them had arrogant looks on their faces at this moment. It was as if the world would soon be under their control. Huang Yuliang also laughed along with everyone, but he quickly stopped laughing. "But Zhaoqing Manor is not our target. According to the plan discussed with Zhu Huihua, we need to conquer the Guangzhou Manor and even the entire Guangdong province. Only then can we better suppress the Southern Ming Empire's military strength, make our name known, and expand our forces. So we need to keep advancing and advancing. Yes, we cannot be satisfied. There are more wealth and beauties waiting for us. We need to continue attacking." Gung Jun, the leader of the 4 heavenly kings and the only one who followed young Master Huang to Zhaoqing Manor, stood up and agreed with Huang Yuliang. "Well said. Heavenly King Gung's words are our next target. Reality has proven that the so-called Southern Ming Empire's army cannot withstand a single blow, but—" Huang Yuliang's voice trailed off. When everyone heard the word, but they could not help but perk up their ears. They knew that was the main point of today's meeting. However, there's a piece of bad news. Emperor Yingzong of the Ming dynasty sent an imperial envoy to Guangzhou Prefecture. He's currently mobilizing troops and preparing to come to Guangzhou Prefecture. It seems like he intends to have a decisive battle with us. Huang Yuliang didn't let everyone wait for a long time. After keeping everyone in suspense, he told them the rest of the story. After saying this, he intentionally shrugged his shoulders. "Oh, right. I heard that the imperial envoy is the great Ming's Duke of Loyalty. Oh, he's only 21 years old this year." "Who?" As Huang Yuliang finished his last sentence, there was a burst of exhalation in the hall. Originally, when they heard that the Southern Ming Empire had sent a large army and an imperial envoy to fight with them, they were still a little nervous. No matter what, the Ming army's combat power was still very strong. In addition, the Ming army was very strong. If they really gathered their strength to counterattack, they would have to retreat. However, when they heard that the imperial envoy was a young man who was only 21 years old, they all laughed. Their faces, which had just become tense, completely relaxed at this moment. As for the great Ming's Duke of Loyalty, these people naturally ignored him. Perhaps in their eyes, the so-called nobility of the Ming dynasty was just someone who had a good life and came from a good family. They definitely wouldn't believe that such a person would have any ability. These people would overlook Yang Qindong and the Duke of Loyalty. Naturally, it was because of the lack of information. News was not smooth, public opinion was not developed, and Yang Qindong was only known around the capital of Baiming. In addition, Emperor Yingzong, Zhu Qizhen, intentionally downplayed this person's name. Yang Qindong's name was indeed not well known in the south. Without anyone knowing, these people naturally judged people based on their first impression of him. He was only a 21-year-old young man. How could he be in the eyes of these generals who relied on their own hard work to obtain results? Everyone had an indifferent expression, and Huang Yuliang also laughed along. He himself also didn't know much about Yang Qindong. Or rather, he didn't want to know. He was only a young man in his early 20s, so he didn't put him in his eyes. If it wasn't to motivate his subordinates, he probably wouldn't even mention a word about the sixth young master. Good, brothers. The southern Ming dynasty has no one. They actually sent a little kid to lead the army. Do they really think we are made of mud? Since it's like this, let's show them our strength and let them know how powerful we are. Huang Yuliang laughed loudly, raising everyone's morale. Young master is right. Since the southern Ming dynasty dares to look down on us, we should show them our strength. The generals all became excited. The successive victories had made them lose themselves. This time, they were facing a young man, so they underestimated the enemy even more. At this time, not only the generals of the bandit army, even young Master Huang Yuliang was very proud. Seeing everyone filled with righteous indignation, he felt that the morale of the army could be used, so he shouted loudly, "Good, since everyone has agreed, we will send troops to the Guangzhou Palace and capture the Ming imperial envoy alive. Send troops to the Guangzhou Palace and capture the Ming imperial envoy alive." The generals below followed Huang Yuliang's shout and shouted the slogan together. Their eyes were filled with longing and fantasy for a beautiful future. Under Huang Yuliang's call and strategy, the bandit army quickly gathered the rations they stole from various places and started to prepare to directly attack the Guangzhou Palace that had no obstacles in front of them. To them, if they took down this place, it was equivalent to taking over the entire Guangdong. When that time came, their influence would be even greater, and there would be even more heroes coming to join them. Guangzhou Palace. It had been 7 days since the last meeting in the big tent. In these 7 days, Yang Qindong refused to see anyone. Every day, he would listen to music and watch dances in the back garden of the palace. Even when Han Qing brought 400,000 liang of silver, it was his follower, Tiger's Mane, who was responsible for receiving it. When they arrived, it was like Mount Tai was pressing down on them. It gave people the feeling that the situation on the front line could not be delayed. Whoever dared to delay for even a moment would be killed. But after settling down, it was so quiet. It was as if the world was at peace, and there was only pleasure and enjoyment left. This kind of contrast made many people unable to understand. However, due to the fact that Yang Qindong had killed Jia Ping and punished Han Qing, he was too ruthless. Although everyone couldn't figure it out, no one dared to ask. The entire situation seemed to have stopped here. Yang Qindong relied on the name of the imperial envoy and his decisive actions last time to make everyone feel afraid. No one dared to disturb him. In comparison, the Guangdong political commissioner, Lu Youfu, and General Guaning did not receive such treatment. The palace they were temporarily staying in was filled with people and carriages every day. Many people came to ask about how to deal with the upcoming battle. As the Guangdong political commissioner, Lu Youfu was more worried about the situation in Guangdong than anyone else. After all, if there was a big problem here, he would certainly be at fault. He had originally been shocked by Yang Qindong's methods when he first arrived. He thought that with such an imperial envoy, the Guangdong matter should not be difficult to resolve. But after 7 days, there was suddenly no movement, and he couldn't sit still any longer. Until one day, he suddenly received a battle report saying that Huang Yuliang's bandit army had already set out from Zhaoqing Palace. When the army's vanguard headed straight for the Guangzhou Palace, he could not sit still no matter what. "Men, prepare horses. We are going to General Guan's palace." In General Guan's palace, Guaning was writing a battle report in his study. The so-called battle report was Guan Ying's daily report of the battle on the front line to the southern Ming court. If there was a battle and there were results, it could be reported twice a day, or even thrice a day. But now, even if it was a battle report a day, Guaning did not know how to write it. Speaking of which, Guaning was slightly different from normal generals in the army. He had studied before, and had even become a shiozai. It was only because he had no hope of becoming a shiozai that he changed careers and joined the army. Because of his quick thinking and outstanding performance, he was recognized by Kuang Yi and was transferred into the military. It was not difficult for a shiozai to write a battle report. But now, the same thing in his eyes was giving him a headache. He didn't want the emperor and Minister Xie to worry, but he couldn't go against his will and report the war. Helpless, Guaning painfully wrote on the white paper that today was peaceful, the three armies didn't move, and everything was as usual. After writing this, he called for a personal attendant and had him report it to the relay station. After sitting down, Guan Ying stood in front of the window and moved his waist, which had not fully recovered from the injury. 7 days ago, after being taught a lesson by Beta Persei, he endured the pain in his waist and returned to the palace. Then he lay in bed for 3 days. Even the battle report was written on the bed. After 3 days, he could get out of bed and walk. He had been looking forward to Yang Qindong's next move. But after waiting for another 4 days, there was still no movement. Gradually, his heart, which had been calmed by Yang Qindong's words, became restless again. Standing in front of the window and thinking about what Yang Qindong had said to him, Guan Ying's expression became more and more confused. He admitted that after being taught a lesson that day, Yang Qindong's words were not wrong. Since it was a military secret, the more confidential it was, the better. After all, Guangdong had lost 5 major cities in a row. If one were to say that there were no bandit spies in the government, even he himself would not believe it. Chapter 362. However, if it was just to prevent spies from eavesdropping on military intelligence, would he still be able to win this battle if he didn't move? Could it be that Yang Qindong came here just for fun? Or did he really have a card up his sleeve and already made all kinds of arrangements? When he thought about how the great Ming dynasty's army, other than the Canton 1,000 guards brought by Lu Youfu, who was still in Ganzhou, the rest of the great Ming dynasty's army had been sent out, and many of the mercenaries had also been sent out, he felt a little relieved. Perhaps this Duke of Loyalty had already made arrangements. Guaning was still comforting himself. He thought that since Yang Qindong was able to stay so calmly in Ganzhou, he must have made some preparations. Just as he was thinking, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside the study. Then an attendant's voice sounded. "General Lu Youfu is here," he said. "He has important military intelligence and must see you." Important military intelligence. Hearing this, Guan Ying's expression became tense. "Okay, I'll go over right now." In the main hall of the Guan residence, Guaning saw Lu Youfu, who was burning with anxiety. "Lu Youfu, why are you so anxious? Has Lady Jia's 500,000 taels of silver arrived?" The reason why Guaning brought up the matter of the 500,000 taels of silver was because the imperial envoy's manor had let out word that when Jia Shi's silver arrived, he would only receive guests. Otherwise, even if the sky fell, he was not to be disturbed. Guaning naturally didn't believe this statement. Once there was a military emergency, if Yang Qindong still didn't do anything, it would be a major dereliction of duty. At that time, his position as imperial envoy would be removed. Not only that, but the emperor and Minister Kuang probably wouldn't let him off easily. However, even though he knew that this was just an excuse, Guaning still hoped that this matter could be settled as soon as possible. After all, once the matter was settled, Yang Qindong would have no reason to refuse to see them. He could also fulfill his duty and urge them to hurry up. General Guan, it's not that Lady Jia's silver has arrived. I've already urged them there. Instead, news came from Zhaoqing residence. The bandit leader Huang Yuliang has already brought 80,000 soldiers to the Guangzhou residence. The situation is critical, Lu Yufu said with an anxious expression. There's such a thing? When did it happen? This was the first time Guaning had heard of such a thing. He couldn't help but ask with some doubt. It can't be wrong. This was sent back by the spies I've planted among the bandits. I'm sure the official report will be sent over soon, Lu Yufu said firmly. Since the rebels were able to plant informants in the government, Lu Yufu, as the Guangdong political commissioner, planting an informant in the other party was a reasonable matter. Guaning no longer doubted this point. Instead, he nodded, "This is an important matter. How about this? I will have to trouble Sir Lu to go with me to see the imperial envoy." Of course. Lu Yufu nodded. This time, he came to persuade Guaning to meet Yang Chendong with him. 7 days ago, General Guan had barged into the residence of the imperial envoy and was subsequently beaten. He had long heard the news. Guaning was Minister Kuang Ye's favorite. If Yang Chendong could beat up such a person, he really didn't have the guts to break into the mansion. Guaning agreed. After having a companion, Lu Yufu also had some confidence. Immediately, the two of them left the manor together and headed straight for Yang Chendong's residence. The two of them, one on a horse and one in a sedan, quickly arrived outside the temporary Yang manor in the city. However, without any surprise, they were met with a closed door. Yang Wu, who was guarding the door, stopped the two of them. When he heard them say that they had important battle reports to report, he shook his head. "Sirs, I am truly sorry. You know the Duke's temper. Since he said that before Jia Shi's silver is delivered, no one is allowed to come and disturb him. Even if the sky falls, he won't see you. Brother, please report. This is indeed an urgent military situation. If something happens, I'm afraid you won't be able to take responsibility." Lu Yufu saw that even a doorman could stop him. He was unhappy in his heart and spoke with a threatening tone. "There's nothing I can't take responsibility for. Since the Duke asked me to guard the door, I must abide by the rules set. Please return." Yang Wu was not angry at Lu Yufu's words. On the contrary, he said this with a smile on his face. However, this smile, at this moment, seemed to be asking for a beating. Lu Yufu didn't have any good ideas. He could only look at Guaning for help, hoping that he would speak up. If it really didn't work, he would try to break in. However, Guan Ying's performance was truly disappointing. Seeing that Yang Wu was blocking him, he simply turned around and left. Only then did his voice travel out. "All right, if possible, please inform the imperial envoy that the Jia's silver will arrive very soon. However, the front line is indeed in a state of emergency. If something really happens to the Guangzhou prefecture, I'm afraid no one will be able to bear such a responsibility. Take care, I won't see you out." Yang Wu acted as if he didn't hear Guan Ying's words, and was still smiling. Then, his gaze fell on Lu Yufu and pretended to be puzzled. It was as if he was asking, "What's wrong? Is this lord not leaving?" Humph! Lu Yufu saw the meaning in Yang Wu's eyes, and left angrily with a flick of his sleeve. No matter what, he was still Guangdong's chief political envoy, a second-grade official in the imperial court, and an existence similar to that of a feudal official. Who would normally dare to give him such a look? However, considering that Yang Chendong's methods were a little too rough, he didn't have the guts to barge in. He could only resentfully chase after Guaning, who was about to leave. "General Guan, are we not going to report this matter to the imperial envoy?" "Don't report it first. Let's think of a way to send Jia Shi's silver over first." Guaning lightly shook his head. Then he turned around to look at the Yang manor and left. He had already decided that when he returned, he would write a battle report against Yang Qindong. Inside the Yang Manor, after Yang Wu sent off Guaning and Lu Youfu, he came here. When he saw Yang Qindong, he reported everything that happened outside. "Good, I got it. You did well." Yang Qindong first smiled and then said with satisfaction. After Yang Wu left happily, he looked at Yang San, who was in the study, and said, "It seems that they also arranged spies among the bandits. The news is actually not much later than ours." "Yes, it should be Lu Youfu's doing. It seems that this person is not muddle-headed." Yang San nodded in agreement. Just 2 hours ago, he had already received a report from his spies among the bandits and immediately reported it to Yang Qindong. This was also why Yang Qindong dared to refuse Lu Youfu and Guan Ying's visit, even though he knew that they had a military report. It's just that they are not muddle-headed. They have limited military strength and limited military resources. Even if they want to do something, there are inevitably too many people holding them back. In the end, it's still difficult to stretch out their hands and feet. Yang Qindong commented on Lu Youfu's weakness, or it could be said that it was the weakness of the entire southern Ming dynasty. No one would believe that the dignified, great Ming dynasty did not have any talents. It was just that because of the restrictions of the environment, it was difficult for people with abilities to stretch out their hands and feet. It was just like how if a young person did not experience some hardships and enough experience, how could they be entrusted with important tasks? When they really made a name for themselves, they would probably already be an old person. At that time, the edges of struggle would have been smoothed out, and their will would not be as high. They would naturally learn the principle of subservience. When a young person wanted to stand out, they would also habitually suppress them. This was a kind of cycle. In this way, each generation was worse than the previous. The dynasty would naturally decline more and more, and it would not be far from a change of dynasty. Sighing that the great Ming dynasty was going downhill from prosperity, Yang San, who was standing on the side, said carefully, "Young master, we found some unexpected circumstances regarding Miss Su's matter." "Unexpected circumstances? Tell me." Yang Qindong's interest was piqued. He had always been curious about why Su Monair would appear by his side. Since she was the #1 courtesan by the Qinhuai River, she naturally did not lack money. If she was willing, it would not be difficult for her to marry into a noble or minister's family as a concubine. However, she just had to appear by his side and did not seem to want to leave. Why exactly was this? Through observation, Yang Qindong discovered that the other party did not worship him much. This could be felt from the first time they met. If it was not worship, it was even more logical for him to act like this. This was why he ordered the Security Bureau to investigate this woman's background properly. He even emphasized that they had to start from her background and the people she came into contact with. "Yes." Yang San first nodded in agreement, then said in a very careful voice, "Young master, according to your instructions, we first started from Miss Su's background. It was from there that we found out the difference. Although there were many rumors about her background, we finally found out that Miss Su actually came from an official's family. Her grandfather was once the left assistant minister of the Nanjing 6th Ministry of Rights. His surname was Su and his name was Chung. He was extremely talented." Su Chung? Recalling this name in his mind, Yang Qindong nodded. "That's right. I know this person Su Chung. He is indeed talented. He was even praised by Zhu Di, the founder of the Ming dynasty." "That's right. We also found out that this Su Chung originally wanted to be transferred from Nanjing to Beijing to be an official. However, perhaps because his performance was too stunning, not long after, he was found guilty of bribery and corruption. Not long after, he died in prison. Then, his family was sent away. Miss Su was in this family. However, her luck was not bad. At that time, she was not in the Su residence, but in the countryside. Thus, she avoided disaster. That's right, the person who accused Su Cheng at that time was the current Minister of Rights of the Southern Ming dynasty, Lu Da. Lu Da? Interesting. When he heard this, Yang Qindong's lips curled into a smile. Chapter 363. That's all we found out for now. After all, Lu Da is now the Minister of Rights. He has a high position and is not easy to investigate. Our people will make the best use of the time. Young master, please wait for a while. Seeing that Yang Qindong was satisfied, Yang Sen heaved a sigh of relief. Although Yang Qindong did not mention Su Maner's matter, he definitely placed great importance on it. Otherwise, this girl would not have been able to stay in the Yang residence. This also put a lot of pressure on Yang San. However, when the matter reached Lu Da, it stopped. Firstly, it was because the other party had a lot of power. If they were not careful, they might be targeted. Secondly, it had been so many years. Many things had changed. It would be very difficult to investigate. The two difficulties were very small. Only then did Yang Sen feel a huge increase in pressure. And this matter is indeed not easy to investigate. However, it still needs to be investigated as soon as possible. How about this? Give 100,000 taels of silver to the Nanjing branch, and let them get to the bottom of this matter. Yang Qindong understood Yang San's difficulty. However, the Security Bureau was supposed to do things that others could not do. As long as the investment was huge, it was believed that anything could be uncovered. Not to mention, Su Cheng was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. That was a third-rank official. It was not something that could be done with just one or two people working together. As long as they put in the effort, they should be able to find some clues. Adding on 100,000 taels of silver, it was enough to see how important this matter was to Yang Qindong. Yang Sen nodded heavily. Young master, don't worry. I will arrange it now and strive for an early result. Guaning and Lu Youfu returned after hitting a wall. After the two of them discussed, they decided to take a roundabout approach. They thought of a way to settle the Jia family's matter first. This way, Yang Qindong would not be able to find an excuse to not meet them. Lu Youfu was anxious. He gave the order and naturally had his trusted subordinates to handle this matter, in order to protect themselves. The Jia family did not have the protection of an official like Jia Ping. When Lu Youfu's pressure came, they could only be at his mercy. Speaking of which, the Jia family in Guangdong was considered a large family, but their main focus was on business. In the Great Ming Dynasty, the status of merchants had never been high. They were like a piece of fat meat that anyone with power could take a bite out of at any time. They clearly saw this weakness, so they worked hard to cultivate talents. That was why they had Jia Ping as a general. Although he was only a fourth-grade military officer, he was still considered a member of the bureaucracy. When he did some things, he had some confidence. Unfortunately, this confidence was destroyed by Yang Qindong's appearance as an example to others. After the Jia clan lost their backing and Lu Youfu's pressure, they quickly gave in. The 500,000 taels of silver were delivered to Gan province in just 5 days. When the silver finally arrived, Lu Youfu excitedly called Guaning to go with him to the Yang residence. They wanted to see what excuse the imperial envoy would have to not see them this time. To their surprise, when they appeared in front of the Yang mansion with their personal attendants, Yang Wu, who they had seen last time, had a beaming smile on his face. He even opened the mansion's doors wide and welcomed them warmly. Humph! Seeing this reality, Lu Youfu couldn't help but lightly snort. Then, he and Guaning walked into the Yang residence and arrived at the main hall. Not long after, Yang Qindong walked in under the protection of Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. As soon as he entered, he smiled and cupped his hands. One tael of silver is not bad. This matter has truly been hard on the two of you. Yang Qindong had once served as the Northern Ming's General of Agile Cavalry, which was a second-rank military official position. He himself was also a loyal duke of the Great Ming. In addition, he was currently serving as an imperial envoy. When he was this polite, the two people had no choice but to promptly stand up and cup their fists to return the greeting. Imperial Envoy Darren is too polite. Please take a seat, please take a seat. Alas, when it comes to silver, this imperial envoy is also very helpless. I'm afraid you also know that this time we came to Guangdong on the emperor's orders to quell the rebellion. The national treasury did not give us a single tael of silver. It's said that before the three armies move, the provisions move first. What should this imperial envoy do? Fortunately, Qiao Shongshu was there to help. After reporting to the emperor, the imperial edict allowed them to raise their own silver taels. Moreover, he also said that anything related to the rebel army could be taken away as well. This was indeed the emperor's boundless benevolence, showing compassion for the people of our generation. Although Jia Ping is a general of the Great Ming, he was defeated at the hands of the rebel army and lost a city. This can be considered a heinous crime. You too won't have any objections to taking 500,000 taels of silver from him, right? It seemed like an explanation, but in reality, Yang Qindong was using these words to tell Lu Youfu and Guaning that he had an imperial edict to follow for taking the silver. Even if they objected, they could not do anything. Furthermore, in the future, this kind of thing could happen at any time. When Lu Youfu and Guaning heard this, how could they not understand? In their hearts, they did not like Yang Qindong's greed. However, when they thought about the current crisis of the war, it was not the time to talk about this. As long as they could quell the rebels, what was wrong with letting him take advantage of them? Immediately, the two of them cupped their hands expressionlessly. They stood and said, "Imperial Envoy Darren is joking. Since the emperor has allowed it, we will do our best to cooperate." Good, good. With the two of you saying these words, this imperial envoy's heart can be at ease. Oh, that's right. The two of you probably didn't come just to give me silver, right? Is there anything else? Yang Qindong's face carried a smile, and his attitude became warmer as he spoke. Finally, they could talk about the main topic. Lu Youfu, who had been unable to restrain himself for a long time, stood up 3 times and cupped his hands to say, "Imperial Envoy Darren, the Yellow Bandit Army has already moved from Zhaoqing Manor to Guangzhou Manor. Currently, they have surrounded the city and are attacking the city. The situation is truly critical. I ask Imperial Envoy Darren to quickly dispatch troops to relieve the siege of Guangzhou." That's right, Guangzhou Manor is in imminent danger. Does the Imperial Envoy have any plans to deal with it? Guaning also stood up and asked with a hidden meaning in his words. In regards to Yang Qindong's lack of action these days, Guaning had already reached his limit. In his opinion, this person who was rumored to have the military god's nickname did not have the ability to strategize like he thought. He only knew how to listen to music and watch dances every day. He completely had the image of a young master who enjoyed himself. He really couldn't understand why Kwang Shangshu had chosen him in the beginning. Guangzhou Manor had already been surrounded for a few days. He wanted to see how this situation was resolved. If it couldn't be resolved, how could he explain it to his superiors? Lu Youfu was Guangdong's political envoy and had just been appointed. He was worried about his position in future, so he spoke with a pleading tone. Guaning was the representative of the Ministry of War. He was more concerned about the overall situation. Therefore, He was somewhat disappointed with Yang Chendong. When he spoke, it was more of a questioning tone. When these two different attitudes were put pressure on Yang Chen, the atmosphere in the room became somewhat oppressive. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were standing behind him, were the first to react. They stared fiercely at the two people who were speaking with a pair of tiger eyes. Looking at them, it seemed that once Yang Chendong gave the order, they would fight. The atmosphere suddenly solidified, and Lu Youfu's heart became cold. He felt that Tiger's Mane's gaze had been fixed on him, like a dormant poisonous snake. It seemed that at any time he could jump up and attack him. He couldn't help but feel some regret. If he had known earlier, he would have brought two of his personal guards in. If he had truly angered the capricious imperial envoy, at least he would have had room to maneuver. Guaning, on the other hand, felt Beta Persei's gaze fiercely staring at him. So he also glared back, although they had already exchanged blows, and he knew that he was not the other party's opponent. A soldier could be killed, but not humiliated. This time, even if he was going to be killed here, he couldn't have the slightest timidity. He was an official of the Southern Ming Empire, and he was a general. How could he shrink back because of fear of the enemy? The four gazes were different. Because of these variables, there was an additional trace of murderous intent in the air. The entire room became extremely quiet because of this. All this until Yang Chendong spoke again. Oh, could it be that the city of Guangzhou has already been breached? Lu Youfu didn't know why Yang Chendong asked this, but out of truth, he still shook his head and said, "No, the commander of the Guangdong Guards, General Ma Wei, is currently leading troops to defend the city. It hasn't been breached yet." "Since it hasn't been breached, why are you so nervous?" Yang Chendong's sudden rhetorical question made it seem like he was stating something. This caused Lu Youfu to be stunned. Yes, the city hasn't been breached yet. Why are Guaning and I so pressuring? Guaning also became uneasy because of these words. Then he suddenly thought of something. The original questioning in his eyes retreated a lot, and he asked in a consulting manner, "Please teach me, Imperial Envoy." "Teach you? There's nothing to teach. The truth is placed in front of us. Previously, when I sent Commander Ma way back to Guangzhou, I told him that once the yellow bandits attack the city, he must defend the city for 10 days. Once the time is up, he can abandon the city and leave. All of the responsibility will be on me. Presumably, it hasn't been 10 days yet." Yang Chendong looked at Guaning and spoke in a rhetorical manner. No, it's only been 4 days until today." Guaning reported the truth. "It's only been 4 days, so there are still 6 days. Yes, if we go straight from Ganzhou to Guangzhou, 6 days is enough. There's still time. How about this? Tonight, the two of you will stay in the Yang Manor for a family feast. Tomorrow morning, our army will depart from here toward Guangzhou. How about that?" Yang Chendong's expression was full of confidence. It seemed like he was consulting, but it was more like he was informing. After saying this, he didn't wait for Lu Youfu and Guaning to reply. Instead, he turned to Tiger's Mane behind him and said, "Go, inform the two madams to arrange a family feast. Also, inform Miss Su to prepare a song and dance. Tonight, I will be entertaining important guests." Chapter 364. In the face of a great enemy, no one would be in the mood to attend the banquet. However, considering that this was Yang Chendong's kindness, they could use this opportunity to ease the tension between the two sides. They could also test the other party's thoughts and preparations. After looking at each other, they cupped their fists and replied, "Then we will have to trouble the Imperial Envoy." No trouble, no trouble. Please be punctual for the banquet tonight. Now, you can go back and make the arrangements. Tomorrow morning, we will leave Guangzhou and depart for the Guangzhou prefecture. Yang Qindong laughed loudly, as if the matter had already been resolved. No matter what, they could finally send out their troops. When Lu Youfu and Guan Ying left the Yang manor, there was a hint of joy on their faces. However, when the two returned to the Guangzhou Yamen and prepared to mobilize the troops and make preparations for war, they sadly realized that they only had 1,000 guards to mobilize. In other words, they only had 1,000 soldiers that could go to war. Although there was 1,000 guards outside the Guangzhou prefecture that was responsible for security, they could still mobilize them with their identities. However, if they mobilized them, how would they deal with the Guangzhou prefecture when it was in danger? For a moment, the two could not help but worry. According to the battle report from the front lines, the Yellow Bandit Army had 80,000 men. This was not all of their military strength. There were also large armies causing trouble in other places. Although General Ma Wei was in the Guangzhou prefecture, there was a Guangdong Guard and 1,000 guards with a total of 7,000 soldiers. It was already difficult to defend the city. It was impossible for them to go out of the city and counterattack. In this case, what could they do with the 1,000 men in their hands? Feeling that they did not have enough military strength, Lu Youfu looked at Guan Ying, who was following beside him, and asked, "General Guan, do you know where the soldiers from the Pingyue prefecture and Shaozhou prefecture went?" "I don't know." Guan Ying shook his head and said straightforwardly. He had asked Yang Qindong about this before and was dismissed with a casual sentence of military secrets. "I don't know." This answer clearly made Lu Youfu unhappy. However, Guan Ying was sent by the Ministry of War. Although Guan Ying's position was not as high as his, he was not his subordinate. He could not casually reprimand him. Even if he had anger in his heart, he could not vent it. "It seems that I can only ask the imperial envoy during the banquet tonight. Sai, it's impossible to do anything with just this 1,000 guards institute. Even if we throw them onto the battlefield, I'm afraid they won't be able to do anything." Lu Youfu could not be blamed for shaking his head. What he knew was that although the Yellow Bandits' combat power was average, they would not be a match for the Ming army even if they were to fight one-on-one. However, the difference between 1,000 and 80,000 was too great. He had no chance of winning at all. The two of them, who were originally in a good mood, thus dissipated. They only went about official business and called the 1,000-man commander of the 1,000 Guards Institute over. After making arrangements for the army to depart for Guangzhou tomorrow, they began to look forward to the banquet in the evening. The moonlight tonight was quite good. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the entire earth. It was as if the world was covered with a layer of mysterious white veil. When the hour of the 5 arrived, Lu Youfu sat in a sedan chair. Guan Ying rode a horse. The two groups arrived in front of the Yang mansion. Red lanterns were hung high in the air, creating a festive atmosphere. The two of them, who had something on their minds, were not in the mood to look at the scenery. With dark faces, they were led by Yang Wu to the banquet hall of the Yang mansion. Yang Qindong did not put on any airs. He had already taken his 2 wives to sit at the banquet. The only difference was that Hu Yan and Lady Shui's faces were covered with a veil. This was also due to the system of the time. It was not easy for women to appear in public. "Come, Sir Lu, General Guan, please sit. Ha! Welcome to my family banquet. This time, we will only talk about friendship and not official business." Yang Qindong, with a smile, warmly greeted the 2 people who came in. However, when he said they could not talk about official business, it was clear that Lu Youfu and Guan Ying's expressions became ugly. After saying this, he did not wait for the other party to reply. He turned his head and smiled. "Come, please invite Miss Su." After saying this, he turned his head and said to Lu Youfu and Guan Ying, "Sirs, would you like to listen to a new song I made?" Good. They were going to go to war tomorrow. The two of them had no intention of offending Yang Qindong. They would go along with what he said first. It would not be too late to find an opportunity to ask about the war later. Su Monair came out. She had a slender waist, an exquisite figure, and exquisite facial features. The moment she appeared, Lu Youfu, who had once seen her from afar, widened his eyes at this moment. He stared at her without blinking. He had to admit that this woman could indeed be said to have a fatal attraction to men. Hu Yan's beauty lay in her quiet elegance. Madame Shui's beauty lay in her enchanting temperament. Su Monair, on the other hand, vividly displayed the gentle side of a woman from Jiangnan's water villages. Each had their own merits and characteristics. A maid had already placed the guzheng. When Su Monair walked over leisurely, she first bowed to Yang Qindong and the others. Then she pulled up her skirt and sat down. Then she said in a very pleasant voice, "Sirs, I am not talented, but I would like to present sword and saber are like a dream. Please appreciate it." After saying this, Su Monair gently raised her arm. Then her slender fingers landed on the guzheng. A beautiful tune that was like the sound of nature rang out in the courtyard and drilled into the ears of everyone present. The prelude was not very long, but it had already attracted everyone's attention. Yang Qindong had closed his eyes long ago. He had an expression of great enjoyment. Then the beautiful sound of Su Monair playing and singing by herself rang out in their ears. "Where does my sword go? Love and hate. It's hard to be alone. My saber cuts through the sky. Right and wrong. I know, but also don't know. I'm drunk. Everything is hazy. It was really a good tune and good lyrics. This sword and saber are like a dream was very suitable for playing the guzheng." After Yang Qindong listened to all the songs played by Su Monair these few days, he gave her this song. She had long heard that Yang Qindong had the title of Eastern Commander and was extremely talented. Now that she could finally receive a song personally bestowed by him, Su Monair felt as if she had received a treasure. With her talent in this area, the song was completed after just one night. Now that it was sung by her, the woman's voice had a hint of heroism to it, making it even more beautiful. Even Lu Youfu and Guaning were shocked by this song at this moment. They were quickly immersed in it, with a look of enjoyment on their faces. Even if they were scholars, they might not be proficient in songs, but they would definitely listen and appreciate them. Now that they heard sword and saber are like a dream, they really admired it. Soon, they revealed expressions of enjoyment similar to Yang Qindong's. When the song ended and the sound of the guzheng was still reverberating in the courtyard, the two of them opened their eyes reluctantly. At this moment, Yang Qindong's words were transmitted into their ears. "Ha! Miss Su is indeed amazing. I'm afraid that only you can perform this song so wonderfully. All of this is thanks to the Emperor's grace, allowing Miss Su to come to this imperial envoy's side." Su Monair, who originally had a humble expression, had to reveal an expression of guilt. But when she suddenly heard Yang Qindong's words, her expression tensed up and a hint of panic flashed across her face. "The Emperor?" Lu Youfu was listening enthusiastically. Suddenly, when he heard Yang Qindong mention the Emperor, his face was filled with confusion. On the other hand, Guan Ying's expression was extremely normal. It was obvious that he had already known about this matter. Noticing Lu Youfu's shocked expression, Yang Qindong smiled and said, "Lord Lu, it's like this. This time, the Emperor appointed me as an imperial envoy to quell the rebels in Guangdong. Because he considered that I am young and impetuous, he was afraid that I would be too lonely on the road and wouldn't be able to find anything fun. Thus, he invited Miss Su to accompany me. Sigh, this heart of sympathy really makes this subject feel fearful. So that's how it is. The emperor's imperial favor to the imperial envoy is truly enviable, truly enviable. Lu Yofu nodded his head, as if he had just realized something. Then he said a few flattering words. These words naturally caused Yang Qindong's expression to become complacent. However, what made people disappointed was that Su Monair suddenly stood up and bowed. "Three sirs, I am truly sorry. This servant suddenly feels unwell. Please excuse me." Her bashful appearance gave people a feeling of pity. How could such a request not be allowed? Yang Qindong immediately nodded his head and said, "Since you are feeling unwell, you should go and rest. I believe that the two sirs won't blame you." Of course, of course. We still have to thank Miss Su for bringing us such beautiful music. Lu Yofu immediately expressed his position. From his point of view, this was clearly Yang Qindong exposing everything. No matter what, Su Monair was still a girl. Of course, she would feel embarrassed. Although Guaning didn't say it, he also had the same thought. However, although Yang Qindong had a smile on his face, he was a little more cautious in his heart. He had originally wanted to sound her out. By publicly revealing that Su Monair was sent by the emperor, he also wanted to keep a close eye on this matter. In this way, if she wanted to do anything to him, it would represent Zhu Qizhen's intention. He didn't expect that after this test, this girl would indeed be unable to keep her composure. Although she seemed to want to retreat with a bashful expression, who knew if it was because of a guilty conscience? In any case, the probing this time was effective. Just as Su Monair brought her maid Xiao Yun and turned to leave, Yang Qindong inadvertently glanced at the deputy chief of the security bureau, Yang San, who was hiding in the dark, also left with them. However, because this action was done very discreetly, no one noticed it. "Come, have a taste of this imperial envoy's cooking. Let me tell you, this is something we can't buy even if we spend money on a normal day." Yang Qindong's gaze turned and landed on Lu Yofu and Guaning, looking like a host receiving guests. "Good. I have long heard that the imperial envoy has an expert chef by his side. This time, if I have the chance, I will have a good taste." Lu Yofu immediately said politely. As for whether he believed these words in his heart, that was another matter. Chapter 365. Su Monair brought her maid, Xiao Yun, and quickly returned to her courtyard. After that, Xiao Yun dismissed all the maids who were serving here. When only the master and servant were left, she anxiously said, "Young miss, how did he know that you were sent by the emperor? Could it be that Lord Guaning said it?" "It shouldn't be." At this moment, Su Monair had already regained her calm demeanor. However, her eyes were wrinkled, showing that she indeed had something on her mind. If it wasn't Lord Guan who said it, then who could have told him? Xiao Yun said with a worried expression. She had been by Su Monair's side since she was only 8 years old. Rather than calling her a maid, it would be more appropriate to call her a sister. Usually, the young miss would not hide anything from her. Naturally, she already knew about Su Monair's appearance here, and what she wanted to do a while ago. In the beginning, Su Monair had even made the decision to let her leave. However, she was rejected by Xiao Yun. In her words, she and young miss were already as close as family. They should go through thick and thin together. The more important excuse was that once she left, it would be hard to avoid suspicion. Moreover, this matter was caused by the emperor. Without permission, she would not be able to leave even if she wanted to. Su Monair was naturally very touched by Xiao Yun's unwavering loyalty. However, when she thought of the benefits she could obtain after the matter was completed, she finally made up her mind to continue with the matter. However, she felt a little guilty that she might have implicated Xiao Yun. Now, In the face of Xiao Yun's question of who told Yang Qindong that she was sent by the emperor, Su Monair shook her head lightly. Now is not the time to pursue these matters. There is no point in doing so. What's important is how he sees it, and whether he will be wary of us. If that's the case, I'm afraid that we will have to be extra careful with our every move. After all, you can see from our interactions these days that he is not simple. He might even be much smarter than we imagined. Although the two of them did not mention who he was, this name had long been understood. Other than Yang Qindong, who else could it be? Thinking of Yang Qindong, thinking of his talent and youth, Xiao Yun couldn't help but be moved as she said, "Miss, do we really have to do that? I think he's quite nice. If we give up on the plan and tell him everything, do you think he'll protect us?" Protect us? After Su Monair heard this, she shook her head. Under the heavens, all lands belong to the emperor. We are just women. We just have some good looks. Who do you think would offend the emperor for us? Besides, it's not like you don't know that I'm not afraid of death. What I want is results. That way, even if I die in the underworld, I can still laugh. On the other hand, if you can't do it, even if you continue to live, what's the difference between you and a walking corpse? As if she had said something sad, Su Monair's eyes revealed a sorrowful expression. "Miss, don't think so much. For your peace of mind, we'll just continue to do it. At most, we'll just die together. In the next life, we can still be good sisters." Xiao Yun looked at Su Monair's sad expression and couldn't help but say this. Good sister. Su Monair looked at Xiao Yun with heartache. Then, the two of them hugged each other and cried bitterly. Other than the sound of crying, there was no other movement in the room. A black shadow by the window quietly left without anyone noticing. In the main hall, Lu Youfu and Guaning had eaten quite a lot. The kitchen maid, Ichioer, had been with Yang Qindong for quite some time. Under various strict requirements, her culinary skills had become better and better. In addition, with the help of various high-quality condiments that she didn't have at that time, the food that she made was indeed extraordinarily delicious. On this point, even Lu Youfu and Guaning couldn't help but be convinced. The two of them also ate quite a lot and drank quite a bit of wine. During the banquet, the two of them had also asked about the war. However, Yang Qindong casually waved his hand. It's fine. There won't be any problems in the Guangzhou prefecture. General Ma Wei has guaranteed that we can hold on for 10 days. You can rest assured. All right, I said we won't talk about official matters. Come, let's drink. Although he said they wouldn't talk about it, Yang Qindong still gave the two of them a reassuring pill. Regardless of whether his words were trustworthy, since things had already come to this point, even if they had some worries and doubts in their hearts, it was useless. They might as well relax a little and drink while they had the wine. It didn't take long for the three of them to drink quite a lot. When they walked out of the Yang residence, Lu Youfu's body was a little shaky. Yang Qindong also looked like he had drunk too much. He had someone send them out of the residence. Without any outsiders, he quickly regained his calm appearance. This was his residence. The wine he drank had already been replaced with soft drinks. As such, other than feeling a little bloated, how could he be drunk? Since he wasn't drunk, he didn't immediately return to the bedroom to rest. Instead, he went to the study and saw Yang San, who had been waiting for him. When Yang San saw Yang Qindong, he came forward and said nervously and worriedly, "Young master, I heard some things. However, they didn't say much. I just felt that they seemed to want to harm you. What's going on?" Yang Qindong's expression turned a little ugly. It seemed that the worst outcome had happened. Yang San didn't dare to hide anything. He told him everything that he had secretly heard of the conversation between the two girls. Then he looked at Yang Qindong carefully and waited for the young master's orders. What do you think? Yang Qindong first closed his eyes and transmitted some of the information that he had heard. Then he opened his eyes and looked at Yang San. Young master, from what I see, these two girls obviously came with the intention to die. Although I don't know what they will choose to do, they definitely want to harm you. Since that's the case, why don't we just capture them and interrogate them? I'm not afraid that they won't tell us their purpose. Yang San made a grabbing motion. No, Yang Qindong rejected. If they really want to harm the young master, and they are here on orders, it won't help even if we capture them. If the mastermind's plan doesn't work, he will definitely come up with another plan. Instead of being on guard, why don't we just keep them and keep an eye on them? Young master, you are right. Since that's the case, I will send people to keep an eye on them. I will also send people to investigate and try to find out the truth. Yang San felt that Yang San's words made sense and nodded in agreement. Yes, it is necessary to investigate. However, if they are really here on orders from the emperor, there won't be many people who know about this matter. If that's the case, it will be very difficult to find out the truth. How about this? Make the arrangements. If you can investigate, investigate. If you can't, just let them go. Don't let them be on guard, and alert them. Yang Qindong wouldn't underestimate anyone, not to mention Zhu Qizhen. Even if he was the emperor, he should have capable people by his side. Although the spies of the Security Bureau were very powerful, they couldn't cover everything. He didn't want their actions to cause Ingzong to be on guard. Not only would they lose their brothers, but they would also change their strategy. Understood. I thank the young master for your concern on behalf of my brothers. Yang San said sincerely with a face full of gratitude. The next morning, the people of the Yang residence packed up their things and left Ganzhou City. They met up with the Cold Front Battalion outside the city. The 1st and 3rd Battalions of the Cold Front Battalion were transferred away one after another. Only the 2nd Battalion and the direct subordinates led by Commander Luopu were left, totaling 400 people. As for the auxiliary soldiers, 4 battalions were transferred away. There was an ordinary battalion with 300 people and a reinforced battalion with 500 people, totaling up to 800 people. The mercenaries were left with 1,200 people. Lu Youfu and Guaning only had 1,000 soldiers with them. Both sides added up to 2,200 people. Looking at the pitiful number of soldiers, the officials of the Great Ming dynasty were worried. In their minds, with only 2,000 soldiers, not to mention solving the crisis in Guangzhou, if they were to encounter the Yellow Bandits, it was unknown whether they would be able to escape alive. Very good, it's enough. On the other hand, Yang Qindong looked at the advancing troops that were constantly passing by and nodded his head in satisfaction. He even jokingly said to Lu Youfu and Guaning, who were following beside him, "It's good to have fewer people. They are more mobile and can move faster. They don't have to bring so much military supplies and fodder. It saves a lot of trouble." Yes, as the imperial envoy says, it is true. Lu Youfu agreed with a bitter expression. However, in his heart, he thought that the only benefit of fewer people was that once they encountered an enemy, they could escape faster and would not be encumbered. Just as Yang Qindong said, they had more mobility. Regardless of what other people thought, Yang Qindong would not explain anything to them. After seeing the army depart as scheduled, he returned to the luxurious carriage to rest. If he could sit, he would not stand. If he could lie down, he would not sit. Once Yang Qindong entered the carriage, he quickly fell asleep under the care of Hu Yan and Lady Shui. Not long after, there was even the sound of light snoring. Guaning had originally wanted to come over and ask about the plan. He wanted to see what Yang Qindong was going to do next. What did he need him to cooperate with? However, When he arrived at a place not far from the carriage, he heard the snoring sound. His face immediately turned bitter, but at the same time, he began to feel anger in his heart. He even had the impulse to roar and drag young Chandong out of the carriage. He wanted to interrogate him on what he was thinking and what he wanted to do. However, all of these thoughts were dispelled when he saw Beta Persei guarding the carriage on a horse. If he did it forcefully, he would be the one to suffer. Of course, he was not afraid of suffering. He was not even afraid of death. However, because he disturbed young Chandong's rest and was beaten up, it did not seem worth it. Forget it. When we get to Guangzhou, I'll see what you do. Thinking angrily in his heart, Guanning left to find paper and brush. He wanted to continue writing the battle report. He wanted to report all of Yang Chandong's inaction. He wanted the world to know how lazy this imperial envoy was. He wanted the world to know that the so-called god of war was not worthy of his name. Chapter 366. Under Guan Ying's internal discussion, the group headed straight from Jiangxi's Guangzhou government to Guangzhou's government, just as Yang Chandong had said, because there were few people. The amount of supplies they brought was also small, so the marching speed of the troops was very fast. The distance of 800 li only became shorter and shorter as they walked. On the first day, the Black and White Army had marched 150 li. Of course, this speed was only possible because Yang Chandong had made preparations early on. There were more carriages with the army. Once a soldier was tired, they could take turns to rest on them. On the first day, they traveled 150 li. After 4 hours of rest, the army continued to move forward. The 300 Ming soldiers, who were originally at the front of the army, were also replaced. The elite 2nd Battalion of the Cold Front was in charge of the vanguard. Imperial Envoy, you can't go like this. If this continues, everyone will be exhausted before we reach Guangzhou's government. Lu Youfu panted heavily as he jogged to the side of Yang Chandong's carriage. His face was full of grievances. Guanning also followed over. This time, he didn't say anything. With his physical strength, he could still keep up at this speed. Most importantly, he had a war horse, so it was much easier. Is it very tiring like this? Is it very fast? The curtain of the carriage was lifted. Yang Chandong's face was revealed. However, from the way he spoke, he seemed to be very shocked. Of course it's fast. Imperial Envoy, don't you know that our army's movement speed is usually around 60 li a day? Under the circumstances of rapid marching, 100 li is already the limit. If we travel 150 li a day, people will die. There will be big problems. His figure was already fat. After this torment, he was even more out of breath. Although Lu Youfu had a carriage to sit in, he was used to sitting in a sedan chair. It was very stable, unlike this carriage which swayed back and forth for a day. It was enough to torment him to death. Yang Chandong listened to Lu Youfu's words. His face was full of disbelief. Sir Lu, didn't I already tell the army to bring less supplies? Traveling light should be faster, right? Yes, of course it's faster to travel light. However, it's still too much to travel 150 kilometers a day. Lu Youfu said resolutely. He didn't seem to have any intention of giving up. This was the first time he was so serious about something since he met Yang Chandong. When Yang Chandong saw this determined look, he knew that it would be very difficult to convince this person, so he simply gave up on the idea. Forget it. Since Lord Lu walks so slowly, I'll just stay behind. General Guan, you happen to be here as well. Let's see how many people in the army can't hold on any longer. Let them stay behind and slowly catch up. Of course, if anyone is willing to come with us, you can come with us. After saying this, Yang Chandong entered the carriage leaving Lu Youfu and Guaning outside. What does this mean? Lu Youfu's face was filled with doubt and even some resentment. He looked at Guaning as if he was complaining. At this moment, Guaning was really angry. If Yang Qindong didn't inform him of the division of the army, he could tolerate it. After all, he was an imperial envoy and the main general. He could tolerate it if the army didn't go to the rescue of the Guangzhou government. After all, he didn't have much power and official position. However, now that the army had set out, Yang Qindong still acted as if he didn't care about the soldiers at all. He couldn't tolerate it when he gave the order to abandon the hall. There was no need to tolerate it anymore. At this moment, Guaning was ready to flip out. However, before he could say anything, the curtain of the carriage was opened again. Yang Qindong had changed into a camouflage military uniform and walked out. Yang Qindong, who was wearing a camouflage military uniform, easily made people's eyes light up. If it was said that wearing a green robe before could show off his scholarly temperament, now that he had changed into the uniform of a mercenary, he was really very heroic. The clothes seemed to be tailor-made for him. They fit him so well. A beret was worn diagonally on his head, making him look like a completely different person at this moment. The carriage will be left behind. I'll have to trouble Sir Lu to take care of it. I will personally follow the army. I don't ask for much. You can follow as fast as I can. How about it? Oh, right, General Guan, you won't back out, right? The moment Yang Qindong landed on the ground in his shiny black combat boots, he said this with a calm attitude. Really? Guan Ying's eyes lit up when he heard that Yang Qindong was actually going to set out with the army. There's no joking in the army. Of course it's true. Haha, I'll go first. Follow me. Amidst the laughter, Yang Qindong had already started walking. Beside him, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others followed. Only Tai Qingyi, a few female soldiers, and a squad of Lungfeng soldiers were left beside the carriage. The imperial envoy was going to follow the army and walk at the very front. The requirement was that the army's speed was the same as his. When this news spread, it immediately caused a commotion. Some of the Ming soldiers who were originally thinking about whether or not to stay in the rear were all energized. During the Ming dynasty, the status of soldiers was not very high. In particular, soldiers were considered a lower class. However, compared to ordinary people, they had an advantage, which was that they could achieve military merits on the battlefield. Once they achieved military merits, they could be promoted from a soldier to an official and walk on the path of the sun. Therefore, once a war appeared and there was a chance to win, most soldiers would not think of giving up. They originally thought that with so few people and in such a state, would it be possible to win the battle after rushing to Guangzhou House? If they could not win, then it was better to stay in the rear. At least they could escape if the situation turned bad. However, when they heard that the imperial envoy was going to follow them and that he was going to use his walking speed as a benchmark, everyone became excited. In their eyes, the so-called Lord was mostly an embroidered pillow. If he wasn't born well, then he was well educated. Compared to marching and fighting, he was naturally not a match for them. Now, this young imperial envoy actually wanted to lead an army. Who was he looking down on? This also stirred up the competitive spirit of the Ming soldiers. They decided to use reality to give this imperial envoy a slap in the face and let him know that a true march was not something that could be measured by pointing and drawing on a map. The Ming soldiers became excited because of Yang Qindong's words. The 1,200 soldiers of the Lungfeng and auxiliary soldiers seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. All of them were glowing. All the soldiers who had truly joined the Lungfeng knew that the imperial envoy was the sixth young master. He was their idol. Just being able to fight side by side with the sixth young master in this battle was enough for them to brag about when they went back, much less being able to walk side by side with the sixth young master. How proud was that? All of them were endlessly excited and wanted to use this opportunity to perform well. Other than the officers, the normal soldiers did not know Yang Chendong's true identity. However, the higher-ups had sent word that as long as they followed this imperial envoy and performed well, they would have a higher chance of entering the Lung Feng. This was something they had dreamed of. Since they had the chance, who would be willing to fall behind? They were also holding back their energy and wanted to perform well. There were also some auxiliary soldiers who thought their strength was not bad and wanted to use this opportunity to wrestle with the Lung Feng to see who could walk better, who could walk faster, and who could last longer. They walked and competed under this kind of atmosphere. The soldiers became unprecedentedly excited when Yang Chendong, who was wearing the same camouflage uniform as the Lung Feng, appeared in front of everyone and walked to the very front of the Lung Feng battalion. The entire troop was in an uproar. Guaning followed beside Yang Chendong to the very front of the troop. He also felt that there was something different about the atmosphere, but he only thought that everyone wanted to see the imperial envoy make a fool of himself, so he did not take it to heart. Instead, he seemed to kindly remind Yang Chendong, "Lord Imperial Envoy, please do not try to show off. If your stamina is not good enough, remember to say so. The army is still waiting for your command. Don't worry, this imperial envoy will not fall. You, on the other hand, must follow closely behind me. If you are left behind, you can find a horse to ride. Don't disgrace the name of the Ministry of War." How could Yang Chendong not know that the other party was looking down on him? He was not afraid of anyone when it came to the art of talking. Not to mention, ever since he became Yang Chendong, he had trained a lot. Usually, when he was at the Yang Manor, he would secretly increase his own strength. Everyone only saw that the sixth young master had run the same distance as everyone else, but they did not know how many sandbags were tied under his legs. Not to mention, in his previous life, Yang Chendong had participated in more than 10 emergency training sessions. Not to mention his speed. Even his comrades could display the speed of a human body at critical times. Just like during the Wenchuan earthquake, his comrades had rushed to the earthquake zone at a speed of 200 kilometers a day. However, this was far from his limit. In short, Yang Chendong treated this march as a kind of warm-up training. He had no intention of showing off to others. It was with this thought that he relaxed his body and mind even more. When he rushed on the road, he took large strides and was extremely fast. The group began to move. Yang Chendong walked at the front of the group. Apart from a few cavalry scouts, there was no one else in front of them. There was no one blocking the front. Yang Chendong could display his speed and adjust his breathing at will. He could go fast or slow if he wanted to. It was very comfortable. Yang Chendong was like a pole walking at the front of the team. At the beginning, he began to speed up and speed up again and again. His speed was indeed very fast. He was so fast that after only 3 li, he surprised Guaning. Although he was surprised, Guaning was not worried. Instead, he thought that Yang Chendong was trying to be brave. Even if he really wanted to rush, he should not continue at such a speed. Otherwise, later on, he would not be able to bear it. Even if he rushed to the battlefield in such a state, he would not be able to display the fighting strength he should have. Chapter 367. He wanted to remind Yang Chendong to pay attention to speed and frequency, but he considered that this was the best opportunity to slap him in the face. In the end, he swallowed the words he wanted to say. He wanted to see how long this person could pretend for. Contrary to what Guaning thought, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others, who had been by Yang Chendong's side for many years, were calm. If it had to be said, they were somewhat surprised. Their calmness came from their belief in the young master's personal strength. Their surprise came from feeling the self-confidence on the young master's body. They even had a feeling that the sixth young master's strength seemed to be even more unfathomable. Yang Chendong, who had just turned 21, was indeed in the best condition of his body. Compared to his previous life, where he would inevitably suffer from hidden injuries after completing various missions, he was now completely unscathed. He only seemed to have an inexhaustible amount of strength. At this moment, he only wanted to sweat to his heart's content. Only by doing so could he feel extremely happy and comfortable. Thus, in the eyes of others, Yang Chendong, who was showing off, was just doing normal training. This was just walking. There was no need to run. In his mind, this could not even be considered a rapid march. Even if he could sweat, it would only be a small amount. In order to achieve the goal of sweating a little more while walking, Yang Chendong began to accelerate a few times in succession. This was just to expel more of the impure air in his body. Even if he did not think it was a rapid march, this kind of speed was already very fast in the eyes of others. Only 4 hours had passed, but there were already some Ming soldiers who could not hold on and wanted to fall behind. If it were not for the fact that they wanted to see how long this young imperial envoy could hold on, and this curiosity was too great, there would probably have been more people who could not hold on. He really knows how to act, but he does have some strength. He actually managed to walk at a fast speed for 4 hours. Very good. I want to see how long you can last. Guaning thought to himself. Such a march was actually a challenge for him. In the past, when he was with the army, he always rode a horse. This time, he was not used to using his feet. In addition, Yang Chendong did not give everyone a time to adapt. Instead, he sped up in the eyes of others. This made once they stopped, they would feel all sorts of discomfort all over their bodies. Fortunately, it was normal for their backs and legs, so it was not impossible for him to hold on for 4 hours. Continue. Another 2 hours passed and did not have enough time to rest. During this process, after 15 minutes of rest, the team stayed behind for 15 minutes to soldiers and replenish their nutrition. They could see that even if this young imperial envoy was showing off, his ability to hold on was not something they could compare to. This person did indeed have some skill. General Guaning also had the same thought. At this moment, he had to admit that this young loyal duke's physical strength was indeed very good. It was so good that even he had to admire it. However, if he admitted defeat like this, he could not. While eating, he was endlessly recovering his strength. He was also wondering whether Yang Chendong would continue to walk or whether he had finished showing off and was preparing to get on the horse. He did not give Guaning much time to think. When Yang Chendong ate, his speed was indeed fast enough. If it was someone who did not know, they would not be able to link the way he ate just now to the imperial envoy. He ate much faster than many people. After drinking water, Yang Chendong closed his eyes and rested. This was a habit he had developed in the past. He could always seize every minute on the battlefield and rest at the first moment. The benefit of this was that under the same level of training, he would have more energy and stamina than others. Sometimes it was this extra bit that allowed him to become the final victor. When the 15 minutes were up, Yang Chendong quickly opened his eyes and set out on the journey in an easygoing and energetic manner. Moving with him were still Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, as well as even more Lung Feng and auxiliary soldiers. Compared to the Ming soldiers who were swaying left and right, unable to stand or sit properly, these 1,200 mercenaries still maintained their formation. Although some of them showed signs of fatigue, their energy was still quite good, especially when the group was about to continue setting out and the commanders of the various battalions and platoons began to shout the order to gather. They moved even more quickly, without any intention of dragging their feet. All of this, in Guan Ying's eyes, made his eyes sparkle. At this moment, he more or less felt the strength of the mercenaries. The group continued to move forward. Another 2 hours, 4 hours, 5.5 hours passed. People who had fallen behind began to appear one after another. There were almost no Ming soldiers left, and even among the auxiliary soldiers of the mercenaries, there were people who had fallen behind. On the other hand, the elite Lung Feng battalion did not fall behind, and they were still full of energy. This was the difference between a regular army and an auxiliary soldier. To become a member of the Lung Feng battalion, not only did they have to have a strong political background, they also had excellent military qualities. Even after a few hours of continuous marching, they still held their heads high, looked straight ahead, and strode forward. This march had indeed exceeded their usual training, but it was not as if this had never happened before. In order to train everyone, the Lung Feng battalion would often carry out such field training based on the basic idea of sweating more during normal times and bleeding less during wartime. In comparison, the current situation was nothing, not to mention their idol and spiritual pillar, the sixth young master, was walking at the front of the group. Even though the sky was completely dark, the figure holding the torch was still like a beacon, guiding everyone forward with large strides towards the bright and clear road that was filled with a beautiful future. Guaning was tired, very, very tired. He made a rough calculation. Excluding the 15 minutes of rest while eating, the group had been marching for 20 hours. They had walked for a total of 250 miles, which was close to a day's time. At this time, the sky had begun to brighten, indicating the arrival of a new day. Exhaustion and tiredness made him want to fall to the ground and sleep, but an unyielding spirit persisted in his body. This was perhaps the only motivation for him to persist until now. Everyone rest. You have 15 minutes to eat and drink. If there is someone who needs to relieve himself, please hurry. We will continue in 2 hours. The voice of the commander of the 2nd Battalion of the Lung Feng Battalion, Chun Bo, finally rang out. With this shout, the group started to stop moving forward. Then, hundreds of groups disbanded. But even so, there was still not much noise, and no one complained. Some people just went to solve their own problems, and some even took out pieces of meat patties that were warmed by their bodies and wolfed them down. The 1st Lung Feng Battalion and the auxiliary soldiers had brought a lot of meat patties like this before they set off. In the bags behind them, there was enough food for them to eat for a few days. After every rest, they would take out new meat patties from the bags and put them in their clothes. When they waited for the next time to eat, it would be warm again. The benefit of this was that it could save time to eat. Most of the time, if you could save a minute here, you would have a higher chance of winning on the battlefield. 3 large meat patties were also stuffed into Guan Ying's hands. He was indeed hungry and extremely sleepy, but for some reason, he did not immediately go to eat. Instead, he began to pant heavily. He knew clearly that after 2 hours, he would not have the strength to continue walking. "How are you? Tired, right?" At some unknown time, Yang Chendong's voice rang out by his ear. This made Guaning, who had just closed his eyes and almost fallen asleep, forcefully pull himself awake. "Haha, that's right. I'm really tired. Lord Imperial Envoy, I really didn't think that you would be so powerful when you walk. I've indeed underestimated you before. I apologize to you." Guan Ying's words fell into Yang Chendong's ears and made him laugh out loud. "General Guan, you have already done very well, at least compared to the other Ming soldiers. For you to be able to persist until now is already very impressive. I am also very impressed." "Ha ha." Guaning, who gave a bitter smile, felt a sense of shame. He thought of how he had wanted to see the other party make a fool of himself a day ago. Only now did he know how arrogant he had been at that time. This also perfectly explained the phrase, "There would always be someone stronger in the strong." In the future, he would not dare to underestimate anyone like this. Guaning even found it difficult to speak. Yang Qindong knew that the other party's physical strength had probably reached its limit, so he said with concern, "You should stay and rest for a while. If possible, after you wake up, organize the remaining soldiers and have them make meat pies. In this kind of weather, the meat pies can't be stored for long." That's right, when you make the meat pies, you can't have too little meat. It has to be the kind of meat that has a bite and is very chewy. As for how much silver I spent, I'll give it all to you later. In short, we can't treat these soldiers unfairly. Are there any problems with completing this mission? No problem, Guaning said with a solemn vow and a tone of guarantee. He did not know that at this moment. He was very much like Yang Qindong's subordinate. Good, then I'll have to trouble you. Rest well. After Yang Qindong finished speaking, he patted Guanying's shoulder and stood up. It looked like he was going to walk around and take a look. This made Guaning couldn't help but ask, "Sir, are you not tired?" Chapter 368. How can they not be tired? But the soldiers are tired too. They need to be comforted. Sometimes a general is more like a parent. You must know how to care for your soldiers. Only then will they work harder on the battlefield and bring you more glory. Yang Qindong turned around and said this casually. He then walked toward the other soldiers under the protection of Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others. Guaning slowly closed his eyes as he recalled Yang Qindong's words. He really wanted to comprehend the deeper meaning of this sentence, but he was too sleepy at the moment. He did not have a good rest when he left Ganzhou Prefecture, and after nearly 20 hours of rapid marching, he was already sleepy. After closing his eyes for a few breaths, deep snoring sounds came from his mouth. Yang Qindong did not rest. He was tired, especially a little sleepy. But as a leader, he had to persevere, and he could still persevere. Needless to say, he had already taken a nap when they were marching in the middle of the night. The only difference was that he was sleeping while standing up. This seemed a little inconceivable, but for those who had marched in a hurry, they could only rely on their comrades in the front and back. This kind of sleeping while marching was nothing out of the ordinary. As he walked among the various troops, he merely greeted the 4 companies of the Cold Vanguard Battalion, and it was considered that he had seen them. Yang Qindong was not worried at all about the Cold Vanguard Battalion, who had gone through many tests and used him as their spiritual support. Instead, he was more concerned about the 800 auxiliary battalions. When Yang Qindong arrived at the auxiliary battalions, he was quickly surrounded by platoon and company-level officers. "You guys have worked hard. You guys are also good. Your courage and stamina are not inferior to the Cold Vanguard battalions. This makes me very happy." Yang Qindong praised them as soon as they met. The officers smiled happily and contentedly at this compliment. Those who were able to become officers of the auxiliary troops were those who had strong political ideologies. In fact, many of them had come from the ranks of the Cold Vanguard. If they were trained as officers here, it wouldn't take long for them to return to the Cold Vanguard, and they would be heavily valued. Their future would also be bright. These people naturally knew Yang Qindong's true identity. When they saw the highest leader of Yang Xia praising them, how could they not be happy? After a round of affirmation, Yang Qindong continued to state his expectations. "Tell the soldiers to hold on until we arrive at the Guangzhou Prefecture. We'll take a good rest after we resolve the crisis there. By then, anyone who has an auxiliary soldier who performs meritorious deeds will be given priority to join the Cold Front. This was a promise. Zhu Fangyong, the young general from before, stood up and said, "Young master, from what I see, we probably already know about this news, but Ma Wei doesn't know about it yet. Once he knows about it, he won't be so determined to defend the city. By then, he might abandon Guangzhou Prefecture and leave. Our chance will naturally come." "You're right, but General Zhu, how can we let Ma Wei know that the reinforcements won't be coming?" Huang Yuliang nodded in agreement. However, he still had a headache on how to solve this problem. "Why don't we send someone to talk to Ma Wei in the Guangzhou government?" Geng Jun interjected. "No." Zhu Fangyong directly rejected the suggestion and shook his head. "With our current hostile relationship, even if we say it, I'm afraid they won't believe us. On the contrary, it will weaken our morale." Geng Jun was naturally unhappy that someone dared to reject his suggestion. His tone became a little harsh as he asked, "Since this method is not feasible, I wonder if General Zhu has any better ideas?" It's not that there isn't a way, but I'm afraid it will require General Geng's cooperation." Unexpectedly, Zhu Fangyong actually acted as if he had a solution. "How do we cooperate?" Geng Jun, who was called out, asked in return. Not only him, but Huang Yuliang and the others were also staring at Zhu Fangyong. "It's not difficult," Zhu Fangyong answered straightforwardly. Then he strode to the map hanging in the tent and pointed in the direction of Gan Province behind their army. He said, "Since Ma Wei is waiting for reinforcements, we can use this as an excuse to lure him to attack first." "How do we attack first?" Huang Yuliang asked with interest. "Let them pretend that reinforcements are coming. For example, we can send out a small group of people to disguise themselves as the southern Ming Empire's reinforcements. Then General Geng Jun will lead the troops to resist and retreat while fighting. This will give the impression that our military camp is in chaos. In this way, Ma Wei in the Guangzhou Prefecture will definitely fall for the trap and may come out of the city to provide reinforcements. At that time, we only need to find an opportunity to kill our way into the city. Then we will succeed." Zhu Fangyong explained his plan in one breath. Then he stood to the side and did not say much, as if he was waiting for everyone to agree with him. After he finished speaking, the tent was silent for a moment. Then Huang Yuliang's eyes lit up. He slapped his thigh and said, "The plan is feasible. However, I don't know why General Geng has to lead the troops. Can't we choose someone else?" "Someone else can too. However, since it is a fake defeat, we have to make it seem real. When the time comes, it is inevitable that they will set fire to the camp to create momentum." At this moment, no one knew that this iron-blooded general in everyone's eyes was thinking about the parting words the imperial envoy had said to him when he had just left the Guangzhou city. "Let me tell you, Ma Wei, this imperial envoy does not care what kind of backing you have or what kind of power you have. The Guangzhou city must hold on for 10 days. If you do it, even if you lose the city in the end, you will not be blamed. Otherwise, just wait for your head to be chopped off. When that time comes, the imperial sword will chop down. The people you rely on will be like distant water that cannot quench the immediate thirst. When you lose your life, you will have nothing left." This was how Yang Qindong threatened him. With the example of Jia Ping being beheaded, Ma Wei had no choice but to lower his head. In order to protect his own life, defending the Guangzhou city for 10 days became Ma Wei's goal. Now that he had defended for 8 days, he was not far from completing his mission. If he held on for 2 more days, he would be able to protect his life. If he really lost the city, others would blame him. Ma Wei was still thinking about how to save his life. What he did not know was that outside the Guangzhou city, behind the Yellow Bandits' army, the true reinforcements, the imperial envoy who had given him a death order, Yang Chendong, had rushed over with his army. After several days of rapid marching, on the 8th day of the Guangzhou city battle, Yang Chendong had arrived with his men. The plan was 1 day faster than before. Being able to walk 800 miles in 3 days was, of course, due to Yang Chendong's role model. When the order was passed down that the auxiliary soldiers who performed well in this battle would be given priority to enter the cold front, the 800 auxiliary soldiers seemed to have changed into another person. It was not an exaggeration to say that their footsteps were as fast as flying. The auxiliary soldiers were working so hard and risking their lives that even the cold front in front of them was under great pressure. They could not be overtaken by the auxiliary soldiers. Otherwise, it would be a blatant slap in the face. In order to fight for this honor and for the glory of the cold front, they began to speed up as if their lives depended on it. Chapter 370. As the leader of the army, Yang Chendong could feel the changes and quicken his pace. Everyone was chasing after each other. In the end, the formation was messed up. The cold vanguard soldiers and the auxiliary soldiers walked together. It was truly a case of you and me, and you and me, and you and me. Even General Guaning, who was in charge of the food supply behind him, was shocked speechless by the sudden increase in speed. He rode a horse to deliver the food that was prepared by the people behind him. Even so, it took him a long time to catch sight of the auxiliary soldiers at the back. By the time he caught up with Yang Chendong's main force, they were already not far from the Guangzhou government. Seeing that they had traveled more than 300 miles in 1 day, he was truly impressed. Guaning had never seen a mercenary army that could fight a war. However, in terms of marching speed, no Ming army in the world would be a match for them. After a full meal, it was another few hours of rapid marching. The vanguard could already see the Yellow Bandits' main camp. When they arrived, Yang Chendong ordered the entire army to rest and conserve their energy for the next battle. Although he said that it was the entire army, there were less than 800 men who could persevere and follow him to the destination. Almost half of the auxiliary soldiers had fallen behind. The original 800 men had been reduced to 400 men. On the other hand, the Cold Vanguard Battalion of 400 men had persevered until now and did not fall behind. From this, it could be seen that the Cold Vanguard was indeed the Cold Vanguard. It was no wonder that they were called the most elite army in the world. It was worth mentioning that some of the auxiliary soldiers had outstanding performances this time. For example, there was a soldier named Peng Yu. He was only 17 years old and had only been in the army for half a year. However, this time he managed to walk in front of many of the Cold Vanguard soldiers. He was even less than 30 meters away from Yang Chendong. It was learned that Peng Yu was originally a hunter in the mountains. What he did most since he was young was to chase the wild beasts on Little Colored Glass Island. After that, a large number of Lungfeng came to his hometown. No matter how hard they worked, they could not get enough food and clothes to wear. His father, mother, and even a few of his sisters had all gone to work in the factories in Crimson City. Every single one of them would be able to fork out a sizable sum of money at the end of the month. As the only son in the family, he was filled with envy, but at the same time, he was also filled with hope for a beautiful future. Especially when his parents and sisters returned home after work, they would tell him about the beauty of Resin City, the variety of new things, the fairness and harmony between people, and so on. All of these made him curious and yearn for it. Peng Yu, who couldn't stay in the first place, decided to go to Crimson City as well. Moreover, he chose to join the army. This was because he had heard from his sister more than once that there was a team called the Cold Front there. Every one of them was very powerful. This made Peng Yu who had never been willing to submit to anyone since he was young, greatly yearned for it. He believed that was where the strong resided, and where he should be. In order to join the army, Peng Yu had thought of some excuses. He knew that as the only son in the family, his parents, especially his mother, would have a hard time convincing him. In the past, the Shang dynasty had recruited soldiers more than once, but his parents had hidden him away. From this point, he could tell their attitudes. To Peng Yu's surprise, when he told his parents that he wanted to join the army, especially the cold front, no one objected. His mother only muttered to herself for a while before encouraging him. "All right, is a responsible man. Then go. Since you're going, do your best and work hard to protect the beautiful life we have now. Mother looks forward to the day you become a true cold front soldier." His mother's attitude was so good that it made Peng Yu feel that it was unreal. Of course, he didn't know that his mother, who worked in Crimson City, had long been changed by the environment. Especially the publicity team in the city, they would often come out to perform for them. They would also paint slogans on the walls, telling them that a beautiful life came from having strong self-defense skills. They wanted their son to join the cold front and become a true warrior. It was a glorious thing to become a true man. In his mother's factory, there were two mothers whose sons joined the army. One joined the Cold Vanguard, and the other became an auxiliary soldier. However, even the mother of the latter held her head high wherever she went with a proud look on her face. Everyone had the desire to compare themselves to others. Peng Yu's mother was naturally envious of her son, especially when she knew that once he joined the army, his treatment would be much better than the sum of their family's income. Moreover, it was glorious for a family to join the army. All these feelings of glory had made her hesitate for a long time, and she was hesitant to let her son join the army. Now that Peng Yu finally brought it up, as his mother, she also felt relieved. An eagle should be released into the sky. Her son had grown up, so it was time for him to go out and explore the world. Thus, Peng Yu signed up and went through the political process. Under the guarantee of his family and neighbors, he became an honorable auxiliary soldier. For outstanding men, being an auxiliary soldier was naturally not their goal. Peng Yu had his eyes on the cold front because they were the only ones who could wear the most handsome military uniform and hold the most advanced firearms. Every time such a person appeared in Crimson City, everyone's gaze would involuntarily fall on him. In particular, the eyes of many unmarried ladies would shine as if they had seen a rare treasure. They couldn't help but like him. All of this made Peng Yu even more determined towards his goal. Becoming a true cold front soldier had become his greatest ambition. This time, when Crimson City sent troops to the southern lands of Great Ming, the news that they needed 2,000 auxiliary soldiers spread out. Every single one of them became very valuable. Peng Yu himself had only been in the army for half a year after defeating 6 people in a row on the martial arts field, and had obtained this precious quota. Speaking of which, this was also a display of fairness in Crimson City. As long as you had the ability, you didn't need any qualifications to get a chance to perform. After Peng Yu participated in the battle as an auxiliary soldier, this was the first time he saw Yang Qindong. Although he only saw him from afar, as a hunter who was extremely observant, he still felt that something was different. For example, he saw that when the regiment, battalion, and company of the auxiliary soldiers saw the green-clothed young master, their faces were filled with excitement and respect. Even the cold front soldiers, who were usually the most mysterious and aloof in their eyes, had a respectful attitude at this moment. This feeling told him that this young master was not simple, because even in the entire Crimson City, there were only a handful of people who could make these officers bow their heads, and there was actually one here. After careful observation, Peng Yu only felt that this young master was not simple. All of this came from the orders given by the higher-ups. It was said that the young master had said that whoever performed better in this rapid march would be able to undergo an assessment when they joined the Cold Vanguard in the future. When the order was given, Peng Yu was truly excited. Although he hadn't been in the auxiliary army for long, he was observant enough to find out some things. For example, the Cold Front's assessment was done according to the principle of first come, first served. There would be a few assessments every year, but it was also done according to the order of registration. For example, if he wanted to qualify for the assessment, he would have to wait until next year. Because of this, he had been vexed and regretted that he joined the army too late. But now, the problem was about to be solved. From the moment he received the order, Peng Yu set a goal for himself. He had to perform well and successfully obtain the quota to enter the Cold Front. Chapter 371. He should be the commander-in-chief. He's so powerful at such a young age. Who is he? Peng Yu was even more confused about Yang Qindong's mysterious identity. Yang Qindong was indeed surrounded by a few officers. He was currently announcing the battle plan to everyone. Heroes, it's time for you to show off your skills. After a few days of rapid marching, the enemy doesn't know that we're already behind them. This is the foundation and preparation for our surprise attack. Next, we'll give them a good stab in the ass and let them feel the pain in their hearts. Yes, sir. Hearing that the battle was finally about to begin, the officers were eager to give it a try. Originally, when they set out from Crimson City, they already knew that there would be a battle. In order to get a spot in the battle, who knows how many people's heads were broken in private. Only then did they have the chance to shine. Seeing that everyone was excited, Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. This was the face of an army of tigers and wolves. If everyone's legs trembled and their bodies went limp at the mention of war, such an army would never be able to win a battle. All right, now I'll announce the battle plan. In a while, there will be 3 signal flares in the air. That's the signal to launch the final attack. At that time, everyone will attack from all sides. Everyone will be like a steel knife stabbing into the enemy's heart. Cold Front Company 1 and Auxiliary Company 1 will attack from the left flank. Cold Front Company 2 and Auxiliary Company 2 will attack from the right flank. Cold Front Company 3 and Auxiliary Company 3 will attack from the middle. The other 2 companies will wait for an opportunity to react to any unexpected situations. Once the attack is successful, the 8 companies in total can attack on their own. When the time comes, platoons will be the attack unit. Remember, this time, the enemy is large in numbers. Do not act on your own accord. If anyone wants to be a hero, even if they have made a contribution this time, they will still be held accountable for their mistakes. You must make this clear to the soldiers below. Obey orders, obey orders. This is the first lesson for all Cold Front and Auxiliary Company soldiers. 6th Young Master, please rest assured. No one will dare to disobey orders. Cold Front Company 2's Commander Luo Pu was the first to express his stance. Yes, we will not disappoint the 6th Young Master. Lu Zhua, the commander of the auxiliary troops, also expressed his attitude. Very good. Everyone, go back and prepare. Remember, no one is to act rashly without orders. Also, no one is to stand out. If the army is exposed because of a single person, they will be punished according to military law. Yang Qindong said with a serious face. At the same time, he was a little excited. Speaking of which, this was his first battle in this world. Although there were only 800 soldiers, it was enough for him. The sky had already darkened. The Huang bandits began to move. According to the plan, a small group of bandits would leave the barracks and head to the rear. Then General Geng Jun would lead his men to make preparations. A total of 5,000 elite soldiers were going to put on a show for General Ma Wei, who was guarding the Guangzhou prefecture. Whether or not they could take over the Guangzhou prefecture tonight would depend entirely on his performance. The high-spirited, heavenly king Gung Jun mounted his war horse. He wore the shiny armor that he seized. Coupled with his tall body, he looked even more majestic. At this moment, he was waiting for the so-called reinforcements to send the signal. Then, he would first lose and then win. Under Gung Jun's anticipation and Huang Yuliang's anticipation, 1,000 Huang bandits disguised as the southern Ming reinforcements walked up a hill behind them. According to the previous plan, they needed to rush down the hill with torches. They would take the lead to defeat Gung Jun's troops and create the impression that the southern Ming reinforcements had won. This way, Ma Wei in the city would be fooled. When they left the city to attack, the Huang bandits would take the opportunity to enter the city and take over the Guangzhou prefecture. The fake reinforcements came up the hillside step by step. In order to hide their strategic goal, they didn't even light torches. As a result, there were always people bumping into each other in the dark and getting some minor injuries, which led to waves of curses. "They're here." Yang Chendong was on the hill. When he saw the bandits rushing over, he knew that Zhu Fangyong's plan had worked. At this point, everyone could definitely see that Zhu Fangyong was a spy that Yang Chendong had planted among the Huang bandits. The original plan was to convince Huang Yuliang to join them. Otherwise, if it didn't work, then they could only attack by force. At that time, with the advanced firearms, they would not be at a disadvantage. The bandits coming up the hill was enough to show that Zhu Fangyong's plan had worked. Since the plan to beat them at their own game had worked, Yang Chendong did not hold back anymore. He knew that the opportunity was here. He immediately ordered Tiger's Mane, who was lying on the ground, send the signal flare. "Everyone, attack!" Pung, pung, pung. 3 different colored signal flare flew into the sky. At this moment, not only did the 800 Yang soldiers on the hill see it clearly, even General Ma Wei, who was on the Guangzhou prefecture's city wall, saw it clearly. 3 flares. The moment he saw the signal flare into the sky, Ma Wei became excited. This was the signal that Yang Chendong had discussed with him. Once they saw the 3 flares in the sky, it meant that the southern Ming reinforcements had arrived. For safety reasons, Ma Wei did not immediately give the order to attack. Instead, he told the deputy general to gather the troops. Then, he stood on the city wall and closely observed the movements of the bandits below. At the same time, Huang Yuliang also saw the 3 flares. A bad feeling crept into his heart. He was very clear that his army did not have such a weapon. What did it mean? Who fired it? What did it mean? The main force of the southern Ming army was surrounded in the Guangzhou prefecture and could not come out. There were also no scouts who reported that the southern Ming reinforcements had arrived. Who was the one who made such a commotion? Of course, Huang Yuliang didn't know that the scouts he sent out were all wiped out by the Yang faction's new army, abbreviated as Yang Army or Yang Family Army. With firearms that could take a person's life from a few hundred feet away and telescopes that could see very far, how could the scouts of the bandits be a match for them? Often, they did not even see their opponents before they were killed by bullets that came from God knows where. Huang Yuliang did not know what was going on. The Alliance army also did not know what was going on. He was also confused by the 3 flares. However, along the way, his pride of not meeting any opponents made him not take any precautions. Instead, he was still waiting for the fake southern Ming reinforcements to appear so that he could lead his troops to retreat and pretend that they were not a match. After the 3 flares were fired, 3 companies of the Cold Vanguard and 3 auxiliary troops charged out like wild horses. They jumped out of the trenches and charged towards the Huang bandits that were climbing up the mountain. Looking down from above, they were like a hot knife through butter. In addition, they suddenly appeared and caught the enemy off guard. Before the 1,000 Huang bandits could react, arrows flew over like rain. This was the equipment of the auxiliary troops, and not the cold vanguard. Unless there were special circumstances, they would not use advanced firearms. As such, they could only use crossbows. Fortunately, crossbows were made in the arsenal of Crimson City. In terms of range and accuracy, they were very advanced. The arrows flew over, accompanied by the sound of gunfire. The elite cold vanguard finally launched their attack. Under such an attack, most of the Huang bandits did not even see who their opponents were before they fell to the ground dead. The remaining bandits, who were lucky enough not to be killed, immediately collapsed in an instant. On the battlefield, when the death rate exceeded 20%, there would be signs of collapse. Elite troops would also not exceed 30%. Once this happened, the bandits threw down 300 to 400 corpses. This had already exceeded the maximum ratio of 30%. How could they not collapse? They turned around and ran. At this moment, the bandits who hated their parents for not giving birth to them scrambled down the mountain. Then, in the span of a breath, his widened eyes began to blur. Then, his pupils began to dilate. He could only exhale and no longer inhale. Among the people descending the mountain, Peng Yu's luck was not bad. He was assigned to the auxiliary company of the Middle Army. When the 3 signal flares flew into the air, he followed closely behind the cold vanguard company and rushed out. When he was halfway up the hill, he overtook many of his comrades in the cold vanguard company and rushed to the first echelon. Peng Yu had already made up his mind to perform meritorious deeds. Before the operation, he had already set a goal for himself, which was to kill a famous general among the yellow bandits. Only then could he prove that he was different from the others. He had great confidence in Lung Feng. This was the main reason why Peng Yu dared to make such a decision. With such a strong ally by his side, he did not have to worry about whether he would be surrounded if he charged into the enemy camp. Therefore, at this moment, he used his fastest speed to catch up to the first batch of Lung Feng's troops. With such a good view, he saw Gung Jun riding on a horse and looking around. Peng Yu did not know Gung Jun's true identity. However, at first glance, his intuition told him that since Gung Jun could ride a horse, he was not a nameless person. It would not be wrong to kill such a person. With this thought, he gave up on the ordinary yellow bandits in front of him that he could easily kill. Instead, he quickly charged forward and arrived in front of Gung Jun, who was preparing to retreat. Thus, the scene just now occurred. Peng Yu used a short sword that he carried with him to stab into Gung Jun's chest. Blood flowed out and flowed all over his arm. He actually killed General Gung. Quickly kill him. The personal guards saw all of this. When they saw someone wearing a different uniform appear, and their general being killed in front of them, how could they not understand that the enemy had arrived? Immediately, they yelled and charged over. Peng Yu, who was lying on the ground, saw the people charging at him with swords drawn. He instinctively let go of the short sword in his hand and raised his right foot to kick at Gung Jun's body. Using the force of the kick, he pushed out horizontally and dodged the swords that were slashing at him. When the attack failed, the personal guards followed. As Gung Jun's personal guards, if the general died and they still couldn't do anything, even if they returned to the camp, they would face heavy punishment and might even lose their lives. For the sake of their own survival, they had to kill this brat who came out of nowhere. He did not have the chance to stand up at all. A few swords slashed at him again. In a hurry, Peng Yu raised his right arm and fired a crossbow. the mechanism moved with a heavy spring, and the arrow that flew out hit the throat of a personal guard, killing another person. However, at the same time, a few swords were in front of him. The closest one was only an arm's length away from his chest. At this moment, Peng Yu's eyes were wide open. No one could be indifferent in the face of death. At this moment, the scene of the wild beast in the mountain being killed by him appeared in his mind. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, several gunshots rang out. The bandits who were surrounding Peng Yu and were about to attack him fell to the ground. The pressure of death suddenly disappeared. A feeling of rebirth rushed into Peng Yu's heart. "Brother, are you okay?" A large hand reached over and was in front of Peng Yu. The person who came was the battalion commander of the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment of the Cold Front, Chun Bo. He was the one who saw the danger here. When he saw that someone seemed to be attacking an auxiliary soldier, he led a few other Cold Front soldiers to shoot and eliminate the enemy. Seeing that it was the elites of the Cold Front, Peng Yu knew that he was fine. He looked at the 2 bars and 1-star insignia on Chun Bo's shoulder. He immediately reached out his right hand to hold Chun Bo's hand and stood up. "Thank you for your help, Chief. Peng Yu can't thank you enough. Battalion commander, the enemy's leader, Gung Jun, is dead." At this moment, a Cold Front soldier's voice rang out. Then, Gung Jun's still warm body was carried over. Before the battle, all the Cold Front soldiers saw the portraits of the important leaders of the Yellow Bandit Army. Naturally, this included the leader of the 4 Heavenly Kings, Gung Jun. That was how the Cold Front soldiers recognized him. When the body was brought in front of him, Chun Bo examined it carefully. It was indeed Gung Jun. He smiled and said to Peng Yu, "Your luck is not bad. You're even braver. You actually killed the leader of the 4 Heavenly Kings of the Yellow Bandit Army. Oh, right, what's your name?" Peng Yu never thought that he would kill the leader of the 4 Heavenly Kings of the Yellow Bandit Army, Gung Jun. He only felt that his luck was not bad. His face was flushed with excitement as he said, "Reporting to Battalion Commander, I am from the 3rd Company of Auxiliary Soldiers. My name is Peng Yu." "Good, Peng Yu. You've done a great service. I will report this matter to the higher-ups and record your merit. As for now, the battle is not over yet. You still have to fight bravely. You're quite skilled. Stay by my side for now. That way, we can look out for each other." Chun Bo looked at Peng Yu with satisfaction as he spoke in an appreciative and caring tone. "Yes, I will listen to Battalion Commander's orders." To be able to fight alongside Cold Front was his goal ever since he joined the army. Now that he could fulfill his wish, why would he reject it? Gung Jun was dead. Chun Bo chopped off Gung Jun's head and hung it on his spear. He seized his horse and began to run through the army. As he ran, he shouted to Cold Front beside him, "Gung Jun has been executed. If the rest of you don't surrender immediately, you will be spared from death. Those who resist will be killed. Gung Jun is dead. Those who surrender will live. Those who resist will die." Instantly, shouts rang out from all directions. These shouts were like waves that rushed outwards and quickly reached the ears of the Yellow Bandit soldiers. The 5,000 soldiers that were prepared here were just making a symbolic retreat. However, when they heard the shouts, especially when they saw Gung Jun's head beside the torch on the war horse, their minds went blank. Didn't they say that the retreat was an act to lure the southern Ming army out of the city? Then why did General Gung Jun die? Wasn't this acting a little too realistic? Everyone's thoughts were in chaos. In addition to the sounds of crossbow arrows flying through the air, more and more Yellow Bandit soldiers were killed and fell to the ground. Under such a one-sided situation, some of the great Ming citizens who originally wanted to earn a living felt fear and terror. Thus, the first person to kneel and surrender was the first to do so. Everything was afraid of setting an example. Once the first person knelt and surrendered, there was soon a second and a third. The originally disorderly and untrained yellow bandit soldiers eventually fell one by one. Occasionally, there would be some who wanted to stand up and resist. However, as soon as they stood up, blood would splatter in front of their chests. After being hit by a bullet, they would fall to the ground and become corpses. When everyone realized that those who stood up would die, and those who knelt would live, no one dared to stand up. This resulted in a black mass of people kneeling on the ground. There were simply too many captives. There were at least 2,000 of them. Battalion Commander Chen Bo had no choice but to leave behind a squad of Cold Front and a platoon of auxiliary soldiers to watch over the captives. Then he led the other soldiers and charged towards the Yellow Bandit camp. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.